Good evening, everyone. Welcome to American Advocates. This should be episode 139, coming to you live on Saturday, July 11th, 2026, with a lot of news to go over regarding the Middle East. As promised, I've been pushing it off a little bit, but it is high time we talk about it today to celebrate the weekend. There's no better topic to discuss on a nice, lovely summer Saturday in the middle of July than the Middle East. The scorching hot, fiery, hellbound shithole Middle East. And really, there is a lot to discuss. This is not going to be the same old kind of story here on this channel where I discuss the Middle East and I say, hey, this war's stupid, though there will be plenty of that. But there is a lot of new developments that I've been putting off all week long, and they're very significant. And they tell a very interesting story regarding President Donald Trump, the Middle East, Iran, the U.S. economy, the U.S. military, our relations with Israel, all of it. All of it is changing right now. That's what's important to understand here. Relationships are changing in the Middle East and abroad across the world, all during the latest Iran war developments. We're talking about all kinds of things tonight on this channel. Trump has resumed bombing Iran again today after giving them the deadline a couple of days ago of Saturday, the end of Saturday, which in the Middle East, that's already occurred. They are in Sunday now because they're 5.5 hours ahead of us over there. And he originally gave them this deadline of Saturday to reopen the Strait of Hormuz and to do so freely, meaning no tolling either. He wanted it open and free for all transit. The IRGC seemingly responded to this threat from President Donald Trump, and it was a threat because it came with the ultimatum and implication of open it or we'll bomb you again. And the IRGC has responded to this with yet another strike on a tanker ship that was attempting to transit through the Strait of Hormuz, once again using the Omani sovereign waters to bypass Iran's designated channels. And now Iran has responded to the strikes in retaliation to this by the United States by yet again closing the Strait of Hormuz down entirely. And furthermore, we have even learned now of an alleged assassination attempt and plot being discovered and seemingly foiled by Israel in their intelligence the other day on President Donald Trump's life by Iran, so the claims say. And this seems to have enraged President Donald Trump quite a bit, who now has since gone on to make more threats regarding military action on Iran. And it seems like the Trump administration, Pentagon, CENTCOM, etc., are even eyeing up Kharg Island once more. And I'll explain everything that I think is going on behind the scenes regarding all of this, because there's a lot more to this that meets the eye. And I'm seeing a pattern play out now regarding all of this. Not the obvious pattern. The obvious pattern is the news that I just broke down for you. Peace, ceasefire, no, actually not ceasefire. War, no, actually peace. War, actually. That's the obvious pattern. By now, it was elite to be talking about that pattern playing out back in April. I was, of course, doing that on this channel when no one else was, which is why you should like the stream and subscribe for more content, because I've been on top of it ever since. But there is a different pattern at play here, and once again, I'm going to be one of the first ones to talk about this pattern that I think is happening. I won't be able to prove it, but I'm going to present my case for it to you guys on this episode and see what you guys think about it, because this pattern that I'm talking about, I think is one that's playing out not in the Middle East, like I said, but more internally in the Trump administration. And it's important to actually call this out, I think, because it will enlighten people just how much and what is at stake here. The manipulation, really, that's behind the scenes. Also, as promised, I do want to discuss Trump's latest shift in stances that we saw on display at the NATO summit. He discussed basically and indicated a new shift in perspective on Syria, Turkey, and Spain, weirdly enough, as well. He made several statements at the NATO summit of 2026 regarding these countries, and it has a lot of countries on edge now, because what he announced, what he was discussing, does come with many, many serious implications. Some of these implications and some of the stances and messaging behind this are pretty subliminal and easy to miss, actually. So I'll get into that as well. It's going to be a loaded show tonight. Loaded. We're going to be discussing a lot. So once again, please be sure to like the stream, double tap your phone screens, or hit the thumbs up button if you can find it. That's free for you to do, for you cheap goyim scum who can't afford to pay your super chat tariffs down below. You can still support the channel even if you don't have a dime to your name by liking the stream and double tapping your phone screens. Also, again, like I said, be sure to subscribe to American Advocates, especially if this is not your first time being here. Subscribing allows you to get notified more often when I go live, which is every night. I aim to go live at around 10 p.m. Eastern, but oftentimes I'm late. More often than not, I'm late, but only because I am putting in the utmost amount of research and reading, and contemplating and pontificating and philosophizing some nights, even, with how bad the world looks before I go live, so that way I can be the most effective when it comes to delivering the message. But either way, I do go live daily. Subscribe, turn on post notifications so you're notified every single time I do that. But really, let's start with the first update here. By the way, welcome to my members, always. Got to give the members a shout out. David Cooper, Howard Clegg, I see you guys are here, and I really do appreciate that a lot. Good to have you guys in the chat. So, the first update. And first of all, this is what is most important to note here. Trump, before we discuss anything, Diane, good to see you as well. Before we discuss anything and all of the latest news in the Middle East, to the Strait of Hormuz and Iran, what is important to note right off the bat is that this has been confirmed. Trump has officially cleared the next 3 days of his schedule in a row. And he's now laser focused once again on the Middle East. In the past, we've seen this happen a couple of times, and every time that we have, it has come with major decisions being made in the Middle East regarding Iran, major updates coming following this. So what we've seen, for instance, at the start of this war, Trump cleared the scheduling and was in the Situation Room all weekend long on that February 28th when we bombed the shit out of Iran. We also saw, actually, and this is, I will present this as a hopeful white pill, not to be filled with copium about it at all, but just as a reminder that not every time that Trump has done this has it been a bad circumstance. Trump did clear his schedule. He actually did not even go to his own son's second wedding, Don Jr.'s wedding in the Bahamas. And that actually, when people thought that was going to be more war with Iran, it actually resulted in the first ceasefire back in April that we saw, where it was actually beginning to shape up and move towards the direction of peace. So not every time Trump does this does it result in war and actions. That being said, the context of all of this news right now is anything but what we would look at and suggest or hypothesize as, oh, looks like Trump's going to actually get ready for another peace deal with Iran. No, we're bombing Iran right now, and reports are that Trump has eyed up Kharg Island once again and is deciding on whether or not to take military action on Kharg, and Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz, so it's not looking good. But I did want to just throw that out there as a little bit of a bone for the hopefuls that this will end soon. Not every time Trump clears his schedule for 3 days does it necessarily result in more military action. I do think it's going to be more military action, though, this time around. Secondly, here's the update here. Iran has declined Trump's ultimatum to reopen the strait, right? As I stated at the intro of this episode, Trump gave them the ultimatum. Welcome, MMMM. Good to see you as well, by the way. Trump, hang on, real second. Isles Eat Lair, it costs dollars you can't afford. That's okay. Just subscribe. You don't need to become a member, okay? The membership is more optional if you really want to support the channel, all right? And I appreciate you looking into that. You can just subscribe and then continue watching. That's still very valuable to me. Here we go. Secondly, like I said, they've declined Trump's ultimatum to reopen the strait, which we saw that being delivered to Iran by Trump earlier this week, where he basically said, reopen the strait or I will bomb you. As I've pointed out on this channel, first of all, the threats from President Donald Trump, and I say this as an American, and I say this as a proud Christian American nationalist and Trump voter. I did vote for Trump. and I am a conservative. So I always want to put that as a disclaimer before I go on to then piss off everybody who may be a MAGA cultist full of delusion and copium. But nevertheless, it doesn't change the facts. Every time Trump threatens Iran like that, it does actually violate the Memorandum of Understanding, Section 1 specifically, actually, where in signing that MOU, both sides agreed to move forward in a peace process under a ceasefire without the use of threats of more military violence or force. That's in the MOU. Now, honestly, I think we should look at this entire circumstance and recognize that MOU is dead. It is over with, in my opinion. But what I will say is Trump threatened it anyway, and Iran predictably responded the way that they did by opting to strike another tanker attempting to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. And neither side really has the moral high ground in this. Trump signs an MOU that he doesn't uphold. He doesn't stick to it. He violates Section 1, he violates Section 5, he violates Section 10. Iran responds to this by striking innocent oil tanker ships that are just trying to escape the Strait of Hormuz after being stranded in that strait now for months. The supplies on those ships have got to be running low. So these poor guys are trying to escape in these oil tankers, and Iran uses the innocence of that situation by striking it to punish Trump for not upholding the MOU. So neither side really has any moral high ground to stand on here. And that's what's really happening. Now, really what we have here is this update from CENTCOM that I want to go over with you guys. CENTCOM posted this. They posted this today, just about 4 hours ago now, a little less than 4 hours ago now, and it says at 7:15 p.m. Eastern Time today, U.S. Central Command forces began launching the third round of strikes this week against Iran after Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps forces blatantly attacked MV GFS Galaxy, a Cyprus-flagged container ship transiting the Strait of Hormuz. A civilian crew member is now missing, and the vessel is unable to continue the journey due to an onboard fire and significant engine room damage. Iran was provided yet another opportunity to demonstrate adherence to the Memorandum of Understanding after being held accountable for earlier attacks on commercial vessels, but has again failed. In response, the United States is imposing a heavy cost by continuing to degrade Iran's ability to attack civilian mariners, and commercial ships freely transiting the strait. The strikes are being carried out at the direction of the commander-in-chief. That was the update from the U.S. Central Command today, like I said, less than 4 hours ago in response to all of this. And so as a result, we are once again striking Iran after they struck the tanker ship in response to us trying to guide the ships out of the Strait of Hormuz. I've also pointed this out as well. Trump does violate Section 1 of the MOU by continuing to threaten Iran. He also technically is violating Section 5 of the MOU in doing what he's trying to do right now. Whether you want to agree with that as an American on principle or not is up to you, but objectively speaking, we have the framework that is the MOU on paper, written down, both parties signed it, and what is in Section 5 of the MOU, I've read it multiple times over the course of the past 3 weeks. It's important to understand this. I'm going to reread Section 5 one more time so you can understand why Trump is violating it. And first, really, before I do that, I'll explain to you what Trump is doing. Trump is attempting to bypass Iran's control of the Strait of Hormuz. And I have the map up for this reason. You can see where this Iran flag is. That is planted firmly on an island called Kharg Island. Just west of that is Keshem Island. And this creates a narrow channel. Iran wants the ships to exit the Strait of Hormuz using this pathway here because it's narrow, making it easy for them to control. And Iran, of course, wants that pathway to be the designated path in the future going forward because it makes it easier for them to supervise, control, and then charge a toll for the ships exiting and entering the strait in the future. Which is why Iran's blockade on the Strait of Hormuz, we see where Trump's blockade was. It was down here, right? Iran's blockade was here using the mines, because the mines then force the ships, in theory, to pass up through this way. Now, what Trump has decided to do is he's decided to encourage Oman to open up their southernmost channel that would be technically in their sovereign waters. And sovereign waters, as defined by international law, is essentially the first 2 miles offshore from any given country. And so there is one channel that exists now, essentially, just north of Iran's mainland, or I'm sorry, Oman's mainland, that Trump has basically coordinated with Oman to use in order to bypass this. So the ships are sort of sneaking around this way now and exiting, and that is forcing Iran to take action. Now, again, disagree with the action all you want on a moral basis. I certainly do. Striking these oil tankers is a horrendous action, and it once again reminds us that no matter how we feel about this war or how we feel about how Trump is handling it, the regime is the regime, and they are not people who share in our morals or ideals, and they are, in a way, sort of a mafia, to be honest with you. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is a glorified mafia. It's a powerful mafia. It's militaristic, and it's one of the factions of the Iran military. So it is proper in that sense, but it does act with mafioso type tactics, and that's important to recognize. Now, regardless of how you feel about it, by Trump coordinating with Oman to do this, after signing Section 5 here, which I'm going to read right now, you can see why Iran is doing it objectively. Understanding the enemy or the opponent is important. In doing so, I don't advocate for Iran, but I just advocate that we understand why they're taking these actions, whether or not you agree with them or not. So Section 5 of the MOU, once again, reads as follows. Upon the signing of this MOU, the Islamic Republic of Iran will make arrangements using its best efforts for the safe passage of commercial vessels with no charge for 60 days only from the Persian Gulf to the Sea of Oman and vice versa. It says the traffic of commercial vessels will immediately start, and considering the need for removing the technical and military obstacles and demining by the Islamic Republic of Iran will be instated within 30 days. The Islamic Republic of Iran will conduct dialogue with the Omanis to define the future administration and maritime services in the Strait of Hormuz in discussion with other Persian Gulf states in line with the applicable international law and the sovereign rights of coastal states of the Strait of Hormuz. This acknowledges, the signing of this acknowledges that Iran will have supervision. They'll have the right to supervise and oversee all future transit in the Strait of Hormuz. And Trump signed it. And even then, the wording is very clear too, by the way, like I should point out once more, no charge for the first 6 days. This is a courtesy on Iran's part to allow the ships that have been stranded for months out without a charge. But going forward, the idea is that they would exit under this memorandum of understanding and ceasefire time of peace. And going forward, then they would return and then leave and be charged a toll going forward after the 60 days. That's why that's in there. Trump signed this. And so in doing so, again, I emphasize that in Trump signing this, he acknowledged that Iran would be taking control of this region. And this is part of the outrage in Trump signing the MOU initially. People said it reads as a surrender document, the U.S. surrendering to Iran. And that's because that's exactly what that was. Now what we are seeing is Trump, of course, no doubt receiving word that this is not going over well, has decided to, and I do give him a little bit of props. It's a little clever to coordinate with Oman and attempt to use their sovereign waters to bypass this. It is clever, but you can understand why Iran is responding this way now. It violates the MOU. It's sneaky, it's duplicitous, and they don't appreciate it. In the past, I've also explained just how significant, of course, the Strait of Hormuz is going to be to Iran going forward in the future, not just to profit off of it, but really to maintain a form of leverage over other empires, over other superpowers like the U.S., Israel, etc. And therefore, in maintaining that leverage, it acts as a natural deterrent now when it comes to February 28th, a deterrent against future attacks on their sovereignty and on their mainland. So they really do desperately need to not just exert control over the Strait of Hormuz, but prove that they can maintain control over it, which is why they strike these tankers, as innocent as the tankers are. It is always a demonstration of force that serves as a reminder that yes, they can close down the Strait of Hormuz and exert control over it, and no, the United States really can't do anything about it. And that's why this is happening, and it happened again today. Take note of the fact that the report was, once again, the tanker that they struck. I don't know if it was a cargo ship or an oil tanker, actually, but regardless, the Cyprus tanker that they struck resulted in a crew member missing, who very likely is dead then as a result. Hopefully he survives, but very likely that crew member is dead. So it's a casualty, or at least an injury. It's a catastrophe at the very least. Also, it says an onboard fire broke out. The engine room sustained massive damage, and now the ship is essentially destroyed. It's floating, but it cannot finish its exit of the strait. This use of force then is considered lethal. It's considered powerful and potent enough to actually be something that you should fear. And if you fear it, that means every time Iran threatens it in the future, it is now a threat that will be taken seriously enough that gives Iran the continued leverage and control of the Strait of Hormuz. If people didn't view their threats as serious, then no one would care. But now Iran will continue to threaten this, and it will be taken seriously, which means that the insurance companies that back these tankers will take it seriously and halt all transit through the strait, which means that at a moment's notice, the strait is effectively closed at the just simple command or threat of Iran, and by extension of that, the global economy is essentially being choked at any given time. That's why the strait is so significant to Iran, and that's why they cannot continue to allow Trump to bypass their future control that he agreed to allow in the MOU by weaponizing Oman against Iran. So that is important to understand. And it violates the MOU, like I said. Now, regardless of the facts or how you want to view them, here's the bottom line here. This is an endless cycle because of all of this. It's a loop of death, in all honesty. We've seen Trump prosecute this war without any real clear and believable. And in actuality, there's been no believable stated objectives at the start of this war. Not if you're actually paying attention. It was about nukes. But as I've pointed out several times on this channel, Tulsi Gabbard's intel reports, when she was actually holding that office, are the ones I choose to go by because those are our intel reports. With the long history of Israeli intelligence reporting being so horrendous, being absolutely borderline useless to us, and wrong more often than not when it comes to everything that we lean on them for, all of the major decisions that we've made based off of Israeli intel have been disastrous. Syria, Libya, Iraq, etc. I choose to go off of our own intel. And Tulsi Gabbard's intel report has actually been proven to be correct anyway, with the benefit of hindsight. Her initial intel report was Iran was nowhere near being able to rebuild their nuclear facilities or develop a nuclear warhead. Now we know that's true because it's been admitted by the administration every time they use the term nuclear dust to describe the enriched uranium. That's because the enriched uranium was destroyed in the Operation Midnight Hammer strikes last summer, turning it into dust, and beyond that, burying it under what we now know is hundreds of thousands of tons of rubble. Iran can't simply just re-access these facilities. They must now dig them out, rebuild them, and gather the enriched uranium nuclear dust and try to utilize that going forward in the future. This will take months, if not years, if these reports are true, and I believe they're true, and I believe it vindicates Tulsi Gabbard's reporting over the Israeli intel reporting that Trump clearly chose to default to instead. And so we were told nukes. That's turned out to be a bunch of bullshit, as I said it was all along on this channel. I'm right about everything, which is why, again, you should like the stream, double tap your phone screens, or hit the thumbs up button. It really is the least you could do while you sit down and watch sheer brilliance on display, coming from me, of course. I know many of you cheap goy can't afford to pay your super chat tariffs down below. That balances out the chat deficit of stupidity from all of the swine in chat. But liking the stream is free, and it really does support the channel. And it's literally the least you can do. It adds purpose to your life. Like the stream, you goy scum. Also, be sure to subscribe so you can start sounding as smart as I do in front of all of your even dumber friends. Because I've been right, as my members, as my subscribers, and regular viewers will tell you in chat, I've been right about all of this so far for the most part. And I was right about the nukes. And so, therefore, Trump's decision to prosecute this war was based off of nothing, which is why the narrative has changed so much. It's about nukes. Then it was about regime change. But then they had to change that too because that made it obvious that we were doing it purely for Israel. So then it became about Persian liberation, as they tried to appeal to our emotions as Americans the way a liberal pussy pansy ass would do. Don't you care about the Persians? No, actually, we don't. We care about ourselves. I don't know if you've noticed, but our economy is kind of fucking shit right now. I could give a shit if Persians are liberated in Iran. That's their job to obtain. We don't need to do it for them. And so for that reason, Persian liberation didn't stick. The whole ballistic missile stockpile being a threat to Europe and Israel didn't work. Regime change couldn't be used, and nukes were proven false. And so it's been a sloppy mess. And that's why it's going to end as a sloppy mess. And like I've explained several times in the past, by the way, Iran has done a masterful job of taking control of this all, but beyond the fact that all of the reasons that were presented to us for prosecuting this war have turned out to be stupid or false or didn't work and weren't believable. Iran's done a masterful job taking control of the narrative of all of this, and really what they've done is they have forced this war to transform into a conflict that is now almost entirely about the Strait of Hormuz. That's what it's now about. Trump doesn't talk about nukes all that much anymore when it comes to Iran. Persian liberation is such an afterthought. I think the last they mentioned it was in April. They never cared about the Persian people, and they never will. That's why we bombed the ever-loving shit out of Iran, destroyed their bridges. He's threatening power plant day. You know, he wants to take out their infrastructure. That will literally probably kill Persian people. It's not about them, and it never was. Trump doesn't care about them. The United States doesn't care about them. I don't care about them. You don't actually care about them, even if you pretend to. And so Iran has masterfully shifted all of this. They've shifted all of the focus onto the Strait. And the Memorandum of Understanding really even reads this way for the most part when you read all 14 points of it. It discusses Israel, it discusses Lebanon, it discusses Iran's economy, reparations, and trade, and it discusses Hormuz infinitely more than it discusses this idea of nuclear facilities and warheads and nuclear power. There's actually, if I remember correctly, there's actually only one section that discusses Iran and nukes, and it discusses it in the context of it being a firm handshake agreement. Basically, all other 13 points are you'll give us money, you'll lift sanctions, you'll unfreeze our assets, you'll rebuild our real estate, we'll control the Strait of Hormuz, you'll do nothing about it, you'll stop threatening us, you'll remove your military presence from the Middle East, you'll tear down your military bases that we've already mostly destroyed, you'll leave the Middle East entirely, and in addition to all of that, you'll make sure Israel behaves, and in exchange for all of that, we'll agree to not develop nuclear power. We'll do well, and by that, basically, they're not even talking about that. They're talking about we'll agree to not develop a nuclear warhead. That's, in summary, what the Memorandum of Understanding is. And Trump signed it because Iran has done that good of a job of shifting the focus in the Middle East of what this is about, shifting all of it. And again, beyond all of that, what's important to understand as well is Iran really, truly, also, I think, obviously, wants to punish Trump with humiliation by denying him any real form of symbolic win over them. Which is why, again, after brilliantly forcing this war to now become about anything other than their regime or nukes or Iranian Persian liberation, they're now insisting on maintaining control and profiting off of it, and they will not bend on that. Not only will they not bend on it, but I said that this would be the case back in the first week of March, because it was easy to recognize when they literally put out the statements. Mohammed Ghalibaf, I believe, was the one who said it on Twitter. He said, now, no matter what the United States does, we will close the Strait of Hormuz down at our convenience. We will keep it closed until they leave. And even after they leave, even after the U.S. leaves and stops attacking us, we will then just take control of it permanently. This was their solemn vow, made out of spite at the time, but clearly with every intent of being followed through on. And it is still persisting to this day now, all these months later, first week of March to now second week of July. And their narrative has been not only consistent, but they've been unyielding in being willing to compromise on it. And so with all of that being said, back to war with Iran we go again. And even worse, the irony here is, and this is where it gets even funnier, the irony in all of this is, like I said, Iran has masterfully forced Trump's focus onto the Strait instead of anything else. Because Trump at least can't walk away from it until he gets a symbolic win over Iran, which they're denying him actively by refusing to let go control. And so here's the irony. While Trump and now Secretary of State Rubio and Secretary of War Hegseth continue to push out this narrative, we will never allow Iran to charge a toll for the Strait that violates international law, and it must be freedom of navigation for all, etc. While they say that, recognize this, and this is something I haven't discussed yet, but it is hilarious. It's very ironic, it's very hypocritical, and funny. The United States itself isn't even found as a signature of the UN Clause Treaty, the UNCLOS Treaty. And what is the UNCLS? Well, the UNCLOS is literally the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea. And this is what they cite continually when it comes to freedom of navigation. So the United States is not even a signature on there. We're not even bound by it. Even funnier, neither is Iran. Iran never signed it. So if Iran's not bound by it and the United States is not bound by it, what the fuck are we fighting over? Iran doesn't recognize international law and international maritime law. And by default, actually, the United States doesn't either, since neither of them can be found in the form of a signature on the UN treaty that recognizes it. All the rest of the world, for the most part, most of the first world countries, can be found on it. Not the USA and not Iran. But see, I've explained, I did a whole episode on the Pax Americana and why Iran taking control of the Strait of Hormuz would be so problematic for not only Trump, but for American credibility, U.S. military credibility, America's reputation, Trump's legacy, and really global trade. And it comes back to the Pax Americana, like I did that episode on all the way back in March when I recognized how much of a problem this would be. The Pax Americana is essentially this notion that while the U.S. is not found as a signature on the UN Clause Treaty Agreement, the United States did agree to use our Navy in order to protect international waters and keep them free. Which is why after World War II, we spent so much money investing into our Navy and beefing it up. We do have, I think even right now, the biggest and best, most powerful Navy in the world. Our Navy is what other countries fear, and rightfully so. And we use that Navy, and we always have. We've used the threat of naval action from the United States to keep all international waters open and free and safe. And that's the actual issue here, is that is being jeopardized as it is now becoming abundantly clear that though our Navy is powerful, and though it really is beyond the understanding of most people to comprehend why it's not effective in the Strait, it's actually not really our Navy's fault. It's actually the geography, the topography, the location of Iran itself and of the Strait itself that renders our Navy not effective. But most people will not understand that, and perception is always reality in politics, in the world, anywhere. And the perception now is our Navy actually can't keep these international waterways open and free and safe. Iran strikes the tankers like they did today. That tanker is done. It may as well just sink. It's floating, thankfully. It's got crew on board. One crew member is missing, but it's done. Iran has demonstrated its ability to generate force output via kinetic strikes effectively, shutting down the strait. And America has not been able to answer it with anything other than just equally shutting down the strait, which is not the goal of the Pax Americana. The goal is to keep all these waterways open and free and safe. All we've been able to do is just say, fine, you lock down the strait on your end, we'll shut it down here too by Oman. That's it. And in my whole episode, I go into much more detail, but the summary is, if Iran gets to walk away controlling the strait, then the Pax Americana begins to erode and wither away, and other nations will begin to take note of this. And like I mentioned all the way back in March, you have Turkey and Constantinople and the straits up in Turkey, and you have the Strait of Malacca in Indonesia and the Strait of Gibraltar with Spain. And you have the Balkan Islands, which was a massive historical problem just about 100 or so years ago. So these other countries will now begin to look around, and they'll think to themselves, well, shit, if these borderline second or third worlders in Iran, whatever you want to refer to them as, can do this and profit off of it, why can't we do it with our straits? It could wind up changing everything, which would honestly slow down the global economy tremendously so, because the global economy boomed after the Pax Americana and UN treaty agreement, since now there were no tolls. There was no barbarism or piracy going on in the straits. They were safe and free, which allowed the cost of goods and the prices of everything to decline and drop, which encouraged more consumerism and yada, yada, yada. The global economy boomed post-World War II, and it was a beautiful thing. But if all these countries follow suit, and if Iran is allowed to move forward controlling their strait and America can't do anything about it, then it just destroys everything, the entire notion that is the Pax Americana. I've done a whole episode on that. I highly recommend going back and looking at that episode after this one, of course. Right now, you should sit your ass down, pull out your notebook, pull out a pen, take copious notes, and learn under my tutelage, all while liking the stream and subscribing for more content like this. Then check out that episode later. But really, here's the other thing, too, that's important to recognize and remember. And it is funny, by the way. The whole point of this is to point out the hypocrisy. So Iran and the United States don't recognize freedom of navigation, but they're both fighting over it, right? But here's what's important to remember. None of this was a problem before February 28th. None of it. Iran wasn't doing this. The strait was, in fact, open. It was actually safe. Now, you could argue that Iran's always going to be a looming threat. Maybe I'd agree with you on that. But the strait was open and free for all to pass through before Trump decided to start a war with Iran and before Trump decided to attack Iran out of the blue, all at the behest of the Zionist pigs. And so now with the Strait of Hormuz, Kharg Island, the Middle East, all of the constant ceasefires that have been declared and violated, the memorandum of understanding being signed and seemingly discarded, by the way, within 3 weeks. That's how long the super duper ceasefire lasted, which I intentionally gesture, Max. We are now on a super duper 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 ceasefire, and whenever that will be announced, that won't last either. And even with the alleged now assassination attempt by Iran on Trump that was foiled by Israeli intelligence, there are two important questions to ask here inside of all of this. First of all, how did we get here? Now, I've discussed that at length in the past, so I won't dwell on that one too much, but I will recap it. Secondly, why is this continuing to happen? Why is it happening now? Why is it continuing to happen? Why is it not ending? And that's what I'm really going to focus on tonight, and I'm going to take it a lot further this time than I have in the past. The why. Everyone wants to now know the why. Even the average American chud, which is probably most of you swine in chat, most of you absolute goy scum in chat, finally are probably now dragging yourselves to my feet, and you're saying, please, American advocates, explain to me why. I trusted in Trump, and I thought he was playing 5D chess with Iran and China, and it's just not ending well. Why is this happening? I don't understand. Please enlighten me. That's what I'm here to do. And here's really what's happening here. Trump himself is seemingly becoming more and more agitated. Not just with Iran, but with many of our allies, including Israel. And even perhaps he's getting agitated, I think, more and more internally within his own administration and many of his cabinet members and senior advisors and officials. 3 weeks ago, and this is the sign right here, I think one of the signs when it comes to Trump, when it comes to buyer's remorse, regret, agitation, frustration, and in my opinion, what is amounting to desperation, which is never good. But desperation now is defining Trump. He signed that MOU. It's a surrender document. Of course he has cold feet on it. Of course he has buyer remorse on the MOU. Of course he's violating it. He basically wants it to end. But 3 weeks ago, he made a reference to Herbert Hoover, saying that he doesn't want to be remembered as Herbert Hoover is remembered. And for all of you idiots in chat who don't know who Herbert Hoover was essentially the president that's marked with and associated the most with the Great Depression of the United States, the worst economic times. And Trump knows then, since he's making these references, that this is getting bad. He wouldn't say that otherwise. Trump in the past has talked about Andrew Jackson, Ronald Reagan, the heroes, Abe Lincoln. When Trump was campaigning, those were the presidents he talked about. Now that he's caught with his pants at below his ankles in this war with no way out, it's all a disaster, and both sides are playing tug of war with him. Now he's mentioning Herbert Hoover, the Great Depression president, basically. And that means he knows it's getting bad, and therefore he also then knows what's at stake here. Trump is not being led astray. Trump he is cognitive still. I don't believe he has dementia like Biden does. He is cognitive. And he knows what he's risking then by continuing this. But he does it anyway. Why? And this brings me really to what I want to talk about tonight. Manipulation and ego. Because that's almost certainly what's at stake here behind the scenes. That's what's at play here behind the scenes. And this is what happened. This is what is happening. There's been a massive shift in Trump himself since really back in 2016. Trump in 2016 would have never made these poor of decisions. He was a much different person. And truly, in 2015 and 2016, he was a force to be reckoned with. I compare him all the time to like a Wolverine, the animal, the Wolverine. He has this attitude that coincides like with a Wolverine when it comes to his ego. It's very defensive, but also simultaneously very, very aggressive and very, very quick to respond in the most aggressive manners. Back then, this attitude of Trump's, this Wolverine-like spirit of him, was so atypical, meaning not typical, of the other Republican politicians around him at the time or in the past, that liberals and globalists were startled by it, truthfully, and also couldn't figure it out. They would mistakenly try to fight him face to face, and they'd attack his ego, and they'd call him dumb, and they would basically come at him and try to bombard him with news stories that were not flattering and criticisms that made him angry, and it just made it worse for them because Trump's attitude, Trump's Wolverine-like spirit protects his ego. But that all changed in 2021. Biden's presidency, in all honesty, began the shift. Whether or not it's legitimate that Biden won the election in 2021, and I think everybody is very right to question that, his administration nonetheless was used to weaponize the law system against Trump and punish him, truthfully, for grandstanding against the globalist agenda, against the military-industrial complex, against the elites, against the Zionists, all of it. All of those who pull the strings were enraged at Trump's presidency, and they were angered by it. And so in 2021, after Biden takes the office, Trump is now the most vulnerable that he ever has been, and he becomes subjected to lawfare, basically, being punished by the globalists and the elites. They shattered his world. They threatened to destroy him and his entire family during all of this. He's dragged through court. His empire is on the line. His wife's work is being destroyed before his very eyes. They come after his children. They threaten to throw his son in prison. They threaten to throw him in prison for life, take his money away from him. And it's at this moment, truthfully, that they conquered Trump. They did conquer him, in my opinion. Out of desperation, and this is where we see the effects of it, out of desperation, somewhere around the year 2023, we see President Donald Trump in 2023/2024 decide to run for president again. This is his meal ticket out, by the way, at this point, and he knows it. And this is where we really see him take and decide, make life-altering decisions in the form of taking hundreds of millions of dollars, what would become hundreds of millions of dollars, from figures like Miriam Adelson, who's an Israeli Zionist nationalist bitch, really. That's Miriam Adelson. She's Israel first. She's an Israeli nationalist. She's a Zionist. She's loaded because she's the widow of Sheldon Adelson. She offers him hundreds of millions of dollars in, I think, late 2023, 2024, obviously to go towards a campaign for Trump to run for president again. And he needs the money this time because he refused to take this money, by the way, in 2015. He didn't take it. Not only did he not take it, but he refused to and called it out. He said Marco Rubio would be just a puppet to Miriam Adelson because of how much money she has spent on Marco. He said that little Marco, he'll be a puppet of the Sheldon Adelson and Miriam Adelson. He'll be a puppet. You don't want to vote for little Marco. He's short, he's tiny, he's insignificant, and he takes their money. He'll just be a puppet of the Adelsons, he said. That's what he said. And he literally, in that first campaign, he took like an insignificant amount from them. Being a billionaire, he didn't need their money. He goes in front of at the podium in front of the stage at the debates, receives boos from all of the Zionists, from all of the elites, all of the Israeli Zionists and the big donors, the wealthy Jews in attendance, AIPACers. And he says, they're booing me because I don't need their money. I don't need it. But in 2023, they had him exactly where they wanted him this time. He was weak from the lawfare, and he was on the verge of ruination. And truthfully, in my opinion, desperate to win back the presidency, like I said, because it is his meal ticket. He needed the massive amounts of money, though, to ensure a winning campaign in order to reclaim the presidential office. And so in taking this money, he guarantees the win, essentially. The media starts to become slightly more favorable to him. He's now loaded with the money needed to run a winning campaign, which he does. But really, this begins the process going forward of the manipulation and control over him that I believe we are now seeing play out in full effect. It's all taking form in this Iran war. Not only did they essentially buy him during this time, by the way, but they also learned, this is also important, they can buy him, and they bought the war clearly. Miriam Adelson paid for this war, make no mistake about that. But the ego is still a problem always with Trump. And what I'm seeing when it comes to Trump internally in his administration, who he's surrounded with, I am seeing, in my opinion, an administration this time around that is not only no better than the first administration, the first Trump administration, where everyone said, I love Trump, but he picked all of the wrong people, John Bolton, all of these people. Well, this time, he's also picked horrendous people. Some of them are stupid. I think Pete Hegseth kind of is dumb. Very loyal and admirably so, but kind of dumb, I think, in my opinion. Hegseth's a Zionist. He wants to help Israel build their third temple. He's just an idiot. He doesn't know how to read his Bible right. He's clearly not smart when it comes to military strategy and his ideas. Hegseth is still for this war when most of the Trump administration, I think, has soured on it. There's incompetency, Pam Bondi, Kristi Noem. And then there's the manipulators. And there seems to be a lot of those. And really it comes back to his ego, because I think this administration is full of manipulators who have figured out Trump's ego. Unlike in his first term, like I said, where the ego of Trump is protected by that Wolverine-like attitude. The Wolverine-like attitude allows Trump to punch well above his weight class. He strikes ferociously at all forms of criticism. And this time around, what I think is more evident than anything is they have simply learned to not criticize him. Instead of leaning against the ego, they lean into it. And so really what I think is happening here is they've learned you don't fight the Wolverine, you put it on a leash and you point it at your enemies and you watch it go to town. It doesn't matter if it can win, you literally just leash it and say, see that? Go fight it. You don't insult it for being small, you praise it for being ferocious, and you even call it smart. You point it. You point to the tiger, and you don't say, hey, you're stupid if you think you can challenge that tiger. Instead, you put it on a leash, and then you say, because you're so smart and powerful and ferocious and cunning and clever, there's no way that tiger could stand up to you. I bet you already know this, don't you? I bet you were already planning on taking out that tiger because you can, weren't you? And I'll tell you what, I agree with you. You are so smart. That's what you do. You should take out that. They've learned this. It's a 180-degree approach, and I'm convinced that not only is that happening behind the scenes, but that it's happening and working nearly every time. Because this is the mistake of a lifetime. And not only was it Miriam Adelson's money that bought the war, but it was also, I think, the messaging, and it was the salesmanship that convinced Trump to do it. They have figured him out, and now they are just utilizing him as a pawn, singing his praises rather than sending criticism his way. The manipulation patterns, in my opinion, are evident, by the way, with this Iran war. Think about it like this. Let me take a sip of water here, because I've been talking about this for a while. Trump pulls off a successful operation in Venezuela back in January. I approve of that operation here on this channel. That's what foreign policy should look like. I say it all the time. Monroe Doctrine in effect. Crush Venezuela. Take their oil. Rid their country of Chinese presence. Do it. Get rid of their foreign leader. I don't care about that. That's our Western Hemisphere, and America is the superpower of the West. Canada relies on us. Central America relies on us. South America relies on us. We are in control by default. That's good foreign policy. However, the mission is successful. Trump's praises are being sung. And what do we see not long after that? We see Benjamin Netanyahu visit the White House a few weeks after. And according to all reports that we know, sells Trump on this Iran war in the Situation Room that Benjamin Netanyahu should have never been invited to sit in, by the way. No foreign leader should ever be in our Situation Room, but he was. He sells Trump on the war by reportedly, though Benjamin Netanyahu denied this in his 60 Minutes interview, or kind of dodged around answering it truthfully, but kind of denied it. But reportedly, in that room, he drew conclusions to Trump of Iran being like a Venezuela 2.0. Oh, Mr. Trump, you were just so brilliant, and you succeeded in Venezuela. Iran, Mr. Trump, we have our Mossad intelligence and our IDF intelligence. It is the equivalent of 5 of your CIA, sir. You know that, sir. And so our intelligence is always accurate, and it says, sir, that Iran is ripe for regime change. It'll be just like Venezuela 2.0. Besides, it's time to come fight and die for Israel, you goy. That's essentially what happens. Now, Trump, of course, agrees to it. The war goes horrendously. It's embarrassing for America in many ways, ruins our reputation, like I said, jeopardizes the Pax Americana, destroys our military credibility, rids us of this rids the world of this illusion that America can conquer anybody at any moment's notice. The Venezuela operation was amazing, by the way. We kidnapped a world leader in like 2 hours, and within 12 hours, not even, he was in a New York City prison cell, an entire world leader. You want to put the world and the government and the world leaders on notice? That's how you do it. But you got to leave well enough alone, and he doesn't. And that's what's even more sad, is he then goes and is sold by Benjamin Netanyahu on an unwinnable, horrendous war, and not only undoes all of the Venezuela success and credibility earned from it, but actually just digs a deficit so deep that it is now changing the world forever. And it's horrendous. But Israel continues, by the way. Israel continues to manipulate and pull the strings in the Middle East. They do this by attacking Lebanon when we're trying to work out peace with Iran, and Iran continues on insisting that Israel stops attacking and advancing in Lebanon. They continue to keep tensions high, Israel does, by doing this. They're sabotaging peace outright and deliberately, obvious enough for all to see, but without any care. And they force the United States in doing so to choose sides. And naturally, at least for a while, Trump continues to take the side of Israel, saying one thing on Truth Social about Israel will stop, and then the next day saying, after statements are made public in Israel that they won't stop, Trump then comes out the next day and says, it's not, Israel's separate, what's going on with Lebanon is different, this is between the U.S. and Iran. And even when Trump eventually forces peace by signing the surrender document known as the Memorandum of Understanding with Iran, we still continue to see Israel not only test the red lines mentioned in Section 1 about Lebanon by bombing Lebanon still, but we also see signs of deeper manipulation happening. The MOU is clear that Iran will control the Strait of Hormuz in the future. I read Section 5 to you earlier tonight. It's clear, and Trump signed it, effectively agreeing to it. Yet all of a sudden, now what we see, and this is my main point in all of this, all of a sudden what we see now over the course of the last 2 or so weeks, and especially this past week, is the United States now began to take a hardline stance against Iran controlling the strait. And I think it's clear, as a result of this continual schizophrenic kind of action from Trump and his decision-making process, I think it's clear that someone behind the scenes, probably multiple people, are in Trump's ears making these kind of suggestions that manipulate Trump. I think it could be as obvious as them saying stuff like this, again, appealing to the ego and everything else. Sir, peace with Iran is great, but you just can't let them control the strait, though. You can't let them. It's a bad look, sir. These suggestions aren't being made to help people, by the way. It's literally being made to restoke the flames that is the Iran war. So think about it like this. We are almost on the verge of peace with the MOU. It's signed. It's a surrender document, but it looks like at least there's a chance now for Trump to just withdraw from the Middle East region, focus on domestic issues back at home, and maybe even recover some of the economy here in the United States for the midterm elections. But then all of a sudden, Trump decides, you know what? No, Iran can't control the Strait of Hormuz. We can't allow that. It's manipulation. And really, it's manipulation designed to recognize the position that they're in. They recognize that they're losing some ground with Trump. Israel itself recognizes that they've lost pretty much all favorability with America in the future, certainly. And even though they're losing favorability with Trump, I've explained in the past that Iran is playing 5D chess against Israel, using Trump as their pawn, and it is working. There is a massive divide, increasingly so, between Trump and Netanyahu, between America and Israel, between other countries and Israel. That is why Iran is so hell-bent on listing Israel as a problem in the MOU in Section 1. Lebanon is mentioned 3 times in Section 1 of the MOU, the first paragraph, with the insistency that Israel stops, because every time Israel continues, it exposes Israel as being a filthy, warmongering synagogue of Satan. So all of this is happening, and internally in the Trump administration, you have to be aware it's filled with manipulators that are hardcore Zionists and Israel firsters. So they recognize, okay, it seems like nothing can stop Trump's attitude right now when it comes to wanting peace and to exit the region. How do we try to convince him in the moment, wrongfully so. This is bad advice that he's receiving, but I'm convinced it's happening this way. And the thought process is, well, if we can convince him and play to his ego about the Strait of Hormuz, how it's not a symbolic win, and in fact it's a loss for Trump and for America to allow Iran to control the Strait of Hormuz. If we can convince him that, oh, peace is great, but you gotta open up the strait. You can't allow Iran to control it, with the full recognition, no doubt, that Iran is a hard line for the strait now. They will not give up control, and they intend fully on controlling it and charging a toll, which means it violates a red line of Iran. But they say this to Trump, and it works. And it convinces Trump to now take the hardline stance in opposition to Iran, which does what? It unravels the peace. It unravels the entire process. It spikes tensions back up, and in those tensions, more shit happens. Tankers get struck. The U.S. goes back to bombing Iran. The MOU is now basically both sides are like, well, what good is it? Let's just tear it up. And when that happens, it's back to war. This is the pattern that keeps playing out. It's why we continually see this schizo-like behavior from Trump. Peace, then strikes, then peace, then strikes. It's because, truthfully, he's being, in my opinion, manipulated to some degree. And also, like I've stated in the past, I think the theory still holds at least somewhat true that these ceasefires may in fact just be reload periods, and intentionally so. Because perhaps both sides don't actually really even want peace to begin with. But what we're seeing now, too, is more manipulation unfolding in the form of the other story I want to cover today, and that's this alleged assassination plot that was now foiled by Israel. An assassination plot apparently was attempted to be carried out against Trump from Iran. They want to now apparently assassinate the president. And this could very well be true. I'm not even here to tell you that it's definitely not true. This could very well be true. But regardless of the truth behind it or not, and I'll tell you this, I have serious doubts on it being true. This is literally just more manipulation as well. Or at least it's being used in the form of more manipulation, in my opinion. Because look what this has led to. We hear this report that Trump is at the NATO summit, and he's hell-bent on using the Qatari jet that they gifted him as the new Air Force One. It's filled with luxurious gold plating and furniture inside of it and everything else. And, he says, oh, the Air Force is a little outdated, and the Qataris, they love Trump, the Qataris, and they gave me this Qatar Force One. So he flies on it. But in doing so, and in being insistent on that, it's not actually designed to be as defensive and safe and protective of him while he's overseas. And then we get this news report that, oh my God, your life's in jeopardy. This is Israeli intelligence being fed to him. And so they emergency land Qatar Force One in Britain, where he deboards it and then boards Air Force One and continues in his travels. This has led to more bombing in Iran, though, which has resulted in closure of the strait, and now Trump is reportedly eyeing up more military action in Kharg Island. He's outraged at the idea that Iran may want to assassinate him. And again, there could be a lot of truth to that. When you look at what we've done to Iran, we struck them first. We struck them first unprovoked on February 28th. We bombed a school by accident that we'd never apologized for, and it killed 107 children. We destroyed their entire government. If you really want to understand what this would be like as an American, imagine you wake up tomorrow, despite being, if you're liberal or Democrat or Republican, doesn't matter, however your feelings are on it, imagine you wake up tomorrow to news that a massive bombing run campaign was carried out on the United States. Somehow, Iran got a hold of all of these fighter jets, gifted from Russia, let's say. You wake up tomorrow and the White House is destroyed, Trump is dead, J.D. Vance is dead, Marco Rubio is dead, Pete Hegseth is dead. All of his administrative officials are mostly dead. Just like that in the blink of an eye. And in addition to that, let's say the Pope was visiting the White House at the time and he's dead too. All gone in the blink of an eye. Now we have whoever's next in line, Speaker Mike Johnson, God forbid, would become president, I guess. That would be horrendous. Obviously, what we would do going forward is we would say, fuck Iran, we will destroy them. Flip the tables back, that's what happened in Iran, but they're not actually powerful enough to go head-to-head against our military. So instead, they're adopting a different strategy when it comes to destroying us. They're bleeding us dry. They can't fight us one-on-one. Our Navy's better, our Air Force is superior, and it shows. But instead, they now just spitefully want to bleed us dry. They want to drag this on as long as possible, like I've alluded to before. And when it comes to bleeding us dry, I'll get to that in a second. But really, that's what's happening as a result. And Trump is being manipulated into continually stoking the flames that is Iran's anger. And it's working so much so that now he's talking about Kharg Island reportedly, allegedly. And that leads me to this point. If this is the truth, and if Trump is once again eyeing up Kharg Island out of spite now of this alleged assassination attempt against his life, we have to discuss what would happen if Trump tried to take Kharg Island. And this will go beyond what I've covered before in the past. I've already mentioned all the reasons why it's a bad idea geographically, logistically to try to take Kharg Island. The notion that, first of all, Kharg Island is 500 miles into the Strait of Hormuz, which is well beyond the access that we have via our Navy, which is still kind of stuck at the entryway. So naval support would be a little bit tough in many ways. But in addition to that, it's only 12 miles offshore from the Iranian mainland, which means that it would be just subjected to constant retaliatory strikes. Our troops would try to take Kharg Island. They would be met with, no doubt, pre-laid mines around the border of Kharg Island from the sea. We would need amphibious vehicles to get there. They would hit mines, troops would die immediately. The troops that would then storm the beach would be met maybe with gunfire from Iranian regime militants who are in the island, hiding and waiting with the best superior strategical positions to defend it. And even if we could kill all of the militants on the island no doubt has been booby-trapped with all kinds of explosives and all kinds of claymores and tripwires and IEDs, which Iran, we know historically, has been basically the master of developing IEDs. And so more soldiers would die from gunfire, from booby traps, from the mines around the Kharg Island, and then eventually, let's say, we flooded it with thousands, and so we overwhelm them regardless, despite the loss, and they take the island. Well, it's 12 miles offshore from Iran, which means it will be pre-sighted for all kinds of cruise missile attacks and drone strikes, constant fire from the Iranian mainland, which means more troops would die, and it would be a continuous bloodshed event just to now hold Kharg Island. But beyond that, let's say Trump is willing to follow through on all of that. Those are all the reasons why it's a bad idea, but Trump out of spite now wants to do it. Because on paper, there are some possible good hypothetical reasons why Trump would want to do this on paper. If you disregard everything I just explained logically and geographically, on paper, Trump is eyeing up possibly taking Kharg Island and has been for a while now, and now maybe more so is after the alleged assassination attempt. Because when we initially struck Kharg Island back in March, Trump only took out the eastmost and westmost side of the island where all of the military targets were, deliberately not striking the center of it where all of the oil infrastructure was. And Kharg Island, as I've explained many times on this channel, is responsible for 90% of Iran's oil exports. So it is filled with all of the necessary infrastructure for Iran's economy to prosper. So taking Kharg Island in that sense, he deliberately didn't destroy the oil, which was smart of Trump, thankfully, because it allowed the possibility of the oil markets to be brought back to health a lot sooner with that oil infrastructure still intact, being that Iran is a massive oil player in the world. But so taking the island then, with the oil infrastructure still intact, would do multiple things hypothetically. First of all, it would ensure the shutdown of Iran's economy predominantly, since 90% of their oil exports flow through Kharg Island, and since Iran's economy is predominantly dependent on those oil exports by about 70% or so, if not a little more, it would cripple Iran's economy first and foremost. So on paper, that's the first good idea. Secondly, because Trump didn't destroy the oil infrastructure on the island in the initial strikes back in March, hypothetically, there's an argument to be made that if we took the island now, we could then take control of those oil exports and then force the Strait of Hormuz open as we now gain leverage over the strait because we control the island and the oil infrastructure. And so there's this idea perhaps being floated around that in this perfect fantasy land that is taking Kharg Island and being able to defend it and overcoming all of it, that we could not only force the Strait of Hormuz open entirely, but seize control of Iran's oil infrastructure. That's why Trump's interested in it. But here's what we really need to understand when it comes to Iran and what they've continually demonstrated to us, both in the form of verbal threats and actual military action already thus far. That's been effective. Iran has a very scorched earth policy, if you haven't noticed. When we bombed them all the way back in February and in the first week of March, we saw them strike us back, of course, and try to strike Israel, of course. But in addition to that, they did what Pete Hegseth later admitted was the worst case scenario and what they were hoping wouldn't happen. They struck all of their neighbors, who they aren't really enemies with, but also aren't great friends with either, and in some cases despise for being cozied up with Israel with the Abrahamic Accords and being cozied up with America too much for their liking. So they targeted Bahrain, they targeted Qatar, Kuwait, they targeted Saudi Arabia. And they did it on purpose to punish the entire region for the US and Israel's actions. It's very scorched earth. It's a double-edged sword they're playing with, because now the entire Persian Gulf hates Iran, but also is suffering, not just because of Iran, but truthfully because Iran decided to take these measures after they were bombed unprovoked on February 28th. This is very scorched earth of Iran. And really, what you have to understand then is that scorched earth doctrine that they seem to be embracing. They would later go on to make threats that if they're bombed again severely, they'll take out desalination in the Middle East, for instance. That's more scorched earth policy. Desalination, the process of converting salt water to fresh drinkable water, is what the Middle East is dependent on for survival. There's not a whole lot of rivers or rainfall in many of the Middle Eastern parts, so they need the desalination. And Iran literally already threatens that if they're bombed severely enough again, if Trump follows through on power plant and bridge day, basically, they said, we'll target desalination and people will die. And the entire Middle East will shut down as everyone has to flee the region. So they've threatened that too. And then you take all of that and you understand what that means for taking Kharg Island. Not only would we lose thousands of soldiers' lives possibly, and defending it would be borderline impossible, but even if we could defend it and then subsequently try to take control of their oil infrastructure in transit and exporting, they would go scorched earth on that too. They would no doubt blow up their own oil infrastructure on the island rather than watch it fall into the hands of U.S. control. So that is why it is such a terrible idea. And this would ensure then, essentially, that all of this taking of Kharg Island, hypothetically, would be for nothing. And by the way, if all of that happened and Iran went scorched earth and destroyed that, well, the whole point of Trump leaving it intact was to avoid more global economic issues and catastrophe, truthfully, and allow the quicker resurgence of the oil market's health to resume, because Iran's oil contributes to that. If we forced Iran to make that decision and destroy their own oil infrastructure on Kharg, it would harm the global economy and global oil supply tremendously. And it's already looking terrible as it is. But beyond that, I'm going to go even further beyond that. Here's another factor that people aren't really focused on when it comes to Iran, Kharg Island, etc., U.S. involvement in the Middle East. China and Russia. And the MAGA cultists, and I say this as a conservative and a Trump voter, but nevertheless I recognize what MAGA has become. The MAGA cultists forever now have been jumping through mental gymnastic hoops to maintain this copium level idea that it is Trump playing 5D chess against China using Iran as a proxy. I've explained in the past for so many reasons and in so many ways that have been proven right on thus far and will continue to be proven right on, which is again why you should like the stream, double tap your phone screens, hit the thumbs up button because it's free to do and it helps YouTube's algorithm push this channel out to more people who need to hear this messaging. And you should of course also subscribe to American Advocates for more content like this, because I've been right more often than I've been wrong. It's not only are they wrong on that, and not only have I explained all the reasons why, but you have to understand that China is really poised, in my opinion, to strike the United States via this entire circumstance if the moment presents itself. And what moment would that be? Well, let me run through the hypothetical of trying to take Kharg Island. I already did the hypothetical of why it's a bad idea and what's likely to happen from Iran. But let's say Trump takes Kharg Island and then starts to try to control the Strait of Hormuz and this results in war with Iran because that's what it would turn into. We would need to deploy boots on the ground, and we'd have to start trying to take the coast of Iran to ensure full control of the Strait of Hormuz. There'd be drones and missiles being launched, and it would be a nightmare. It would lead to a full-blown war that will last for years. But let's say all of that happens. Well, China is allied with Iran. They are BRICS nation members. What would China then, or what are they very likely to do at least, if this happens? Iran isn't like some rinky-dink Middle East country. Iran is a prominent Middle East player, and they're becoming an even more prominent player as a result of this war. China would probably feel like they have to respond. And even if you want to argue against me on that and say, well, no, they've in the past BRICS members have been very pussified. They've been very non-reactive to these things in the past. I would be willing to accept that argument somewhat, but this is major because China's oil is largely dependent on this region as well. So it's very beneficial for China to maintain Iran, maintain their presence, maintain their power, etc., and allow Iran control over the strait still. It benefits China. So China would very likely be devastated and outraged at the U.S. going to full-fledged war with Iran. And China has a lot of leverage that they can then add to the circumstance that benefits Iran as well. They would probably, or they'd be likely to at least possibly do things like dumping our treasury bonds, which I've always said is a massive mistake that we ever allowed other countries to buy those. But China owns a lot of U.S. treasury bonds. And as a form of punishment, much like how the United States always issues sanctions on countries we don't like, China has always had this card in their back pocket. And this war is already crushing our economy more and more. It's not going to get better. It is going to get worse. It's why Trump is referring to Herbert Hoover and how he really, really doesn't want to be remembered like Herbert Hoover was. Because Trump knows that if this doesn't go well, a Great Depression could be ushered in. Not just to the United States, but to many parts of the world. Trump himself is saying this. So China recognizes this. If they're poised to strike like I think they are, and if all this hypothetically happens, and if they dump our treasury bonds, that would result in catastrophe for the U.S. economy, and it would be direct punishment from China for waging war with Iran. Dumping treasury bonds would crash our U.S. economy as a result. Our interest rates would spike sky high, which means that loans, car loans, mortgages would soar through the roof. Americans' affordability would be down worse than ever. Midterms are upon us very soon. Cost of living would be unbearable for many Americans. The stock market would crash because investors and the interest rates now they can't borrow the money needed to keep it inflated. And China could then weaponize, in addition to this, and this is what I've warned about in the past, China could weaponize the oil markets against us too. And this is what people are not understanding. And I'm going to explain it again because it is important. First, like I said, be sure to like the stream. It's free to do. It helps the channel out a lot. I just need to sip some water here. Double tap those phone screens though. You literally owe it to me. You'll never get a better analysis than this anywhere else on YouTube. I've been right about 80% of this and I'm going to keep being right about it. And this needs to be heard by more people. I am literally so superior to people like Glenn Sharp down in chat. Like, they can't even fathom the level of playing field I play on intellectually. It's just so far beyond you, Glenn. You should go swipe up and go watch a video about cooking or something, you useless goy. Anyways, like the stream, subscribe for more content like this, especially if you found it motivational. Here's how China can weaponize the oil markets. And I've explained this before, and I'm going to do it again. Because a lot of people point to the oil markets and they say, well, Trump has done such a good job of handling that. That's why I voted for him. He's just such a smart businessman. Notice how the oil markets are doing very well. I need to explain some things to you. China, at the start of this war, almost immediately what we saw do was dive right into their own private oil reserves, which, by the way, are the largest oil reserves in the world. China has access to the largest private oil reserve in the world. I believe it's to the effect of 1.4 billion barrels per day worth of oil reserves. It's enough that can last them for up to 110 days. And they immediately started doing that. What does this mean economically? It means they took themselves off of the global oil markets much more, which actually lowered the demand for oil, which is what allowed President Donald Trump, in truth, to have access to a global oil market that he really doesn't deserve for starting such a stupid fucking war. And all of the brain dead MAGA cultists and all of the economically illiterate absolute morons out there literally said, oh, look, Trump could start a war with Iran, and all of the panicants said that the oil would be bad. That's because nobody understood what was happening. But now we know. China took themselves off the market, so the demand wasn't as high, which actually spared in the short term. It spared Trump in his terrible decision-making process. And actually, though we saw the oil markets become volatile, at one point hitting, I think, 130 or more, when it came to the oil futures, it did level out and it didn't spike up nearly as much as what some people were projecting. Not because it shouldn't have, but because the unpredictable was China doing what they did. But now, with the benefit of hindsight, you have to understand what that means. China's oil reserves will dry up, and the United States' private oil reserves is already dried up, essentially. We have about 4 weeks left until it's gone, and then Trump is at the mercy of the Brent crude oil, the global oil. What happens if he tries to take Kharg Island? And what happens if he angers Iran and we go to full-scale war and it angers China? Will they dump our treasury? They dump our treasury bonds, perhaps. I'm not saying they will, but I'm saying they could. That would crush our U.S. economy, our stock market, and our cost of living overnight. Then let's say their oil reserves are drying up. They come back onto the oil markets. Well, when they do that, the demand soars for oil. This will mean $250 or $300 a barrel of oil. We're talking gas per gallon at $10 or $12 a gallon at the very least, all across, not in California, like the Republicans like to point out, I myself being included in that. I do like to laugh at that disgusting liberal state's high gas prices, because fuck California. I'm talking $10 to $12 a gallon nationwide. And this is inevitable, by the way. No matter what the United States does with Iran now, China will be coming back onto those oil markets soon. They have to. And either way, that means that there's going to be another spike and increase in cost, which will do what? It'll raise the national average price for gas per gallon, which will raise inflation up even more, which will hurt our economy even more, no matter what. Now imagine a hypothetical where Trump is goaded into this war based off of all the manipulation I described that I think is happening internally, taking Kharg Island, angering the world, angering Iran, going to full-fledged war, angering China, they dump our treasury yields. This could get really bad for us. And this is China's MO too, by the way. China literally always uses economic warfare against their enemies. They've been doing this. They like to utilize a tactic called debt entrapment, where they buy up countries' debts so that they can own them. That's actually what they did in Venezuela in the form of, I think, $60 million or so. They bought the debt to own Venezuela. It's why the Venezuelan operation in January was so important and why I approved of it, unlike this Iran war, which followed it, which has been a disaster. But this is what China does. And really, what we're also seeing here is Iran would get the benefits of China's actions in this hypothetical situation because Iran's strategy has always been to bleed empires dry that try to foolishly attack them. The old Persian Empire. Alexander the Great fell to the Persian Empire, essentially. It was his biggest mistake. And other empires too, the British Empire, etc., have all made the same mistake with Iran. Geographically, they didn't understand how impregnable Iran was. And now the Trump administration has done the same. And in all of these cases, Iran did what they've always done. They have just tried to survive, and they have weaponized tactics of slow bleeding. It's not about winning upfront battles. Iran can't do that with us. We have the tanks, we have the naval vessels, we have the fighter jets. But Iran can just go into utter defense mode and drag this on for weeks or months or, God forbid, years. And it's our economy that actually can't handle it. Iran's economy is suffering, no doubt. Don't make no mistake about it. But unlike the United States, which could, in theory, and what I've advocated for at this point in time, leave at any time, we could just leave, Iran can't leave. So they don't have anything to lose. They're not an island, and they're a massive country. They're not going anywhere. So that's the only option they have anyway, is just survive. And the option then is to survive while also inflicting minimum pain through their slow bleeding tactics. And that's what they're doing. That is why they're dragging this out. Inevitably, if we don't conquer Iran, we'll just have to retreat. And we will see a poor, pathetic Trump, with a ruined presidential legacy, inevitably have to just slump away and withdraw from the region. And that's all happening right now. In addition to that, let's not forget about Russia either. So China can play the economic game in many different ways. One of them is guaranteed: the oil. The dumping of treasury yields is just a hypothetical, but it's always a card that China reserves the right to play at the right moment. And make no mistake, they will do it. They want to destroy. China loves that this is happening. They love this. This is not 5D chess against China. They love this. It's hurting our economy, and they consider us to be their main rival in what is now truthfully a bipolar world anyway. It is China and the US. And if our economy dwindles as a result of this, it gives China even more leverage going forward in the future. So if they see the opportunity to strike our economy through dumping treasury yields, they'll do it. And no matter what they do, they're coming back onto the global oil markets soon, very soon. And that's going to be felt very horrendously so by the United States as our strategic oil reserves dry up and as the Strait of Hormuz is now shut down again, which understand what that means. That means 25% of the global oil is still not flowing. And even if it gets started Monday, Trump will announce peace, no doubt, Sunday night for the sake of the markets. Even if it gets started again Monday, it is going to take years. We've seen this with the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. Briefly, I'll remind you all of that. When the Houthis did what they did with the Red Sea and the Bab el-Mandeb 2.5 years ago, that strait became an issue. The insurance companies that were insuring the tankers passing through it all of a sudden didn't want to insure the tankers anymore because it was almost guaranteed they'd be damaged by Houthis, or at least possibly so. Not worth the risk. When the ships aren't insured, they don't pass through the strait. And when the strait has been threatened in the past and the danger risk is high, the strait is very slow to reopen. So even after the U.S. takes care of the Houthis and bombs them, and the Houthis go, okay, fine, we'll let the passage through the Bab el-Mandeb. The insurance companies look at that and they go, seems shady. Let's wait and see what happens. We're still not insuring the ships. And that is why that the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, even to this day, has only ever been restored to 75% of the total volume of passage through it, not 100. That has long-term effects on our gas and oil, by the way. It will be no different with the Strait of Hormuz, so it's already going to be bad no matter what. Now it's really just a question of how bad does it get? And really who determines that at this point is Trump, Trump is being tugged in 3 different directions at this point, and all 3 of them are trying to manipulate him towards their agenda. And this is the nature of forever wars. This is what Zionism looks like. Forever wars, globalism, the military-industrial complex. It's the nature of all of that. And it's why I refer to this region constantly as quicksand. It is quicksand because you don't just dip a toe like in a pool. You put your foot down and it sinks. And you take a step further and you sink more. And now you're trapped. And that's what we're seeing with Trump, and that's what we're seeing with this whole Middle East situation. All these factors are at play. And if Trump continues to go down this path more, he'll just get more stuck in it. That's just the reality, which will lead us to inevitable war, by the way. And that's definitely, by the way, if we go to war with Iran, that is the point of no return. Trump's legacy will be swallowed up, the United States economy will crash, and we will dwindle away in power when it comes to the global economy, when it comes to us being the global empire and hegemony of the world. And this could be fast approaching. In fact, in my opinion, I actually think there may be, on some sides of this, a deliberate attempt and desire to usher in World War III. I do actually think that. And I'm going to explain why, because people are not understanding this fully either. But first, be sure to subscribe, of course, to American Advocates if you're enjoying this analysis and breakdown. It's free to do. Turn on post notifications so you're notified when I go live. Helps the channel out a lot. Also, double tap your phone screens and like the stream. That's also free to do. And it's really the least you goy scum idiots could do, really. It's the least you could do. You poor goy who can't afford to support the show any other way. At least like the stream for the love of God. There's no excuse for you not to. But yeah, deliberately, I think that there are some sides here that really do want to see World War III ushered in. I'm going to explain why. I told you this would be a very in-depth stream, a very loaded show, but we got to cover all of this so that people are aware. The fourth turning is upon us. That's what you really need to understand. The fourth turning, who uh, the fourth turning to me, by the way, was basically this idea. It's a book, and it was actually recommended to me by this guy named Mark Mitchell, who I highly recommend you follow on X. He used to be the head pollster for Rasmussen Reports, no longer. He's on his own now, and he could use the support, and you should follow him. He puts out the greatest, such good information. And I learned about the fourth turning because of this guy, Mark Mitchell, head pollster at Rasmussen at the time. Go follow him. I mean it. Great page. But the fourth turning basically is this idea that, like seasons, the world goes through four different turnings, four different seasons, and they each represent something different. And the fourth turning really represents the final stage. It's the winter before the spring. It's the destruction of the old ways and the old establishment right before spring, where you see the ushering in of a new establishment, right? And so we're in that right now. It's very clear we're in the fourth turning. And what you have to understand is, historically, this pattern plays out much like all the other patterns I've covered today. And it's always been in the past the elites and the world rulers that have done a better job of recognizing the moment where the fourth turning is upon us and using those to usher in essentially large wars. They've done a better job of recognizing this than the people, who are not as informed and aren't really savvy to the power dynamics at play in the establishment, the establishment as it is. And so when they recognize these fourth turnings, they always have deliberately, fourth turnings have always been almost always marked with deliberate large scale wars that have been prosecuted. And this allows them to essentially build up while the wars are being waged and fought. It allows the elites and those in power, the rulers, to maintain control and build up a new first turning type establishment. It's all under the cover of war. And that's what you need to understand. While because people are suffering right now, the economy gets worse, the wars, people suffer too much during all of this to really be able to take control of the process. And what we all know instinctually, by the way, what is coming during this fourth turning. Here's the truth behind all of this. Unlike all of the times in the past where the people have been distracted by wars and poverty and a bad economy, a Great Depression, World War II, whatever you want to, however you want to look at it. In the past, people have not had the same access to information that we have now. We have this. You guys are all here right now listening to me, who you should be listening to. You should be taking copious notes and subscribing and liking the stream, of course. You won't find a better channel than this. But in the past, we didn't have this. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have the age of information that we're in. And it is a double-edged sword, this internet, and I'll explain why in a minute here. But because we didn't have that, it's different this time, at least to some degree. Much different. And the elites know this. And so that's why we're seeing all of this seemingly playing out a lot quicker than it probably should. And we all then instinctually understand and recognize then what a new first turning will bring, what the fourth turning ending and the destruction of the old ways with the building up of a new establishment will be if we allow the elites to control it. And I'm talking about AI surveillance and social credit and a digital currency. Some of that's already being implemented in other parts of the world anyway, and now they're trying to push for it here. We have the flock cameras, the data center push, that's very obvious, Palantir, Peter Thiel, and really, again, we're on the verge of war. Which is why I'm telling you, I think that some people, at least, who are in the higher echelons of society and government, actually want World War III. And they want Trump to provoke Iran to the point of no return. Because under such circumstances, we would see the U.S. economy collapse, which would bring about the hunger and poverty in correlation with the war. And people would once again be focused on not the bread and circuses, but on poverty and survival. And unlike in the past, and this is where the double-edged sword comes into play, people may not have had as good access to information 100 years ago, but they also were able to more easily self-sustain. And now that's kind of flipped weirdly. We may be in the age of information, but people are as hopeless and pathetic when it comes to survival as ever before. We can't self-sustain anymore. I mean, I know vaguely what to do, but I'm not an experienced hunter. I have a backyard garden. I know how to grow food to some degree, but I don't know what I'm doing medically. Our ability to self-sustain is at an all-time low. And so while there's this concern from the elites for sure that we're in the age of information, it's too obvious and the people will rise up. The truth of the matter is, in my opinion, if the U.S. economy collapses, and if we go to war with Iran, and if hunger and poverty and starvation comes in the form of, say, a second Great Depression, the people are going to have to be totally dependent on the government. Everyone will submit to the government because you'll need them for the food. You'll need them to survive. You are not capable. There is no community anymore. Unlike 100 years ago, where everyone went to church, and truthfully, in our country, our communities were centered around neighborhoods and church and family. That's already been psyoped and destroyed. Feminism and globalism and all of this bullshit atheist nonsense. It's all gone. Communities destroyed. Boomers ushered in all of this. Individualism and greed and, the establishment support and all of that. That's all here now. And so now more than ever, people are doomed if all of this goes away. Whatever will you do if you can't buy your meat at a grocery store? Whatever will you do if you can't buy your eggs at a grocery store? Do you own cattle and chickens? Furthermore, do you know how to slaughter them or collect the eggs? Whatever will you do if you can't buy your green peppers and tomatoes and onions at the grocery store? Do you know how to grow them? Are you growing them now? No, of course not. Whatever will you do if you need medical aid? Do you know how to treat wounds and heal yourself? No, of course not. You need the hospitals, you need the doctor's offices, you need the grocery stores, you need all of that. You need the butchers who are selling to the grocery stores, all of that. And if war breaks out and a Great Depression happens, the government takes complete control of all of this. And then they have the power over you, because without that, you're nothing. And so understand that. All the while, they're building data centers and they want to introduce flock cameras, the AI surveillance state. This is all happening. It's being pushed for now in the Republican administration, by the way, for the MAGA cultists that want to pretend like Trump would never allow it. It's happening now. The vice president is backed by Peter Thiel, the Jewish billionaire who supports Republicans. And while I'm not saying Democrats are the answer, because they're not, I am just warning you that this is very likely what is being pushed, at least by some sections and segments in our own government and in the upper echelons of society and power. So that's the thing. Now, it's risky for them to do this, but it can work if managed properly. And that's where the internet's a double-edged sword, too. We're in the age of information, but more than ever, men can't change tires, men can't work on their cars, men can't hunt, don't hunt, can't fish, don't fish, can't garden, won't garden. You're totally dependent, and you will submit to the government if they tell you to under such circumstances. There will be no uprising, you fat 255-pound cuck. You own your cute little shotgun. You might be able to deal with an intruder from your armchair, but the second you try to sprint with that, and the second you try to be involved with some sort of uprising that will never happen, you'll tear your ACLs, you fat fuckers. You will stay inside and hide and submit to the government and take the food stamps and the rations like a good little goy, and everyone knows it. All of us know it. Your hardest decision right now is choosing between Whataburger and In-N-Out Burger. In 6 months, if this all happens this way, and I'm not saying it will, I'm just warning you of the possibilities, and a Great Depression is ushered in, you won't be used to the kind of hard decisions you have to make then. You will want Big Daddy government to come save you. And that's the end of it. And so while we're in this age of information, the double-edged sword is, of course, that you can look up how to do any of this now, but you won't. You watch your goy basketball bullshit, and you watch all of your other stupid nonsense on your phone, and beyond that, this phone and all of this right now is collecting all of the data on you for when Palantir comes in. This is a surveillance device I'm streaming on right now. I'm on the list and I'm fine with it, by the way. But so are you. So you're not going anywhere. You're not doing anything. And they know this. And so you have to recognize this. And what we're seeing now in regards to Trump, back to the manipulation of this war, and his apparently schizophrenic, tacoing out kind of circumstances, we're seeing now Trump doing this in recognition of all of these realities, hitting us all at once. Israel not being our special ally, being a country filled with Zionist pigs that makes up what we call the synagogue of Satan. Trump knows that. Trump knows Netanyahu doesn't like him. Trump knows Israel doesn't care about our U.S. economy. They don't care about our well-being. They do nothing for us. Israel produces nothing and takes everything. They're a whore nation, totally dependent on us. but then simultaneously arrogant enough to think that they run the show. Trump knows this. It's frustrating. That's why we are seeing a man, in my opinion, who is so conflicted. He took the Miriam Adelson money. So in some ways, he's almost owned by them. Plus, there's the blackmail element. Not just the carrot, like I pointed out, but also the stick that comes into play. Is it any coincidence that the second Trump talks about peace with Iran, his wife Melania comes out in an impromptu press conference that he seemingly didn't even know about and talks preemptively about being involved in the Epstein files? Ask yourself these questions. All of this is at play behind the scenes with Trump. It all works towards the manipulation. And that's why he's conflicted between what's right, what's good for America, but also what he's being told to do, what he's supposed to do, etc. He's clearly cucking to Zionism when it comes to starting this war with Iran. But what we also see again out of him in the form of him talking about Herbert Hoover 3 weeks ago and saying, I don't want to be remembered like Herbert Hoover, he says. And again, why? Because Herbert Hoover is the Great Depression president. We see him say that because he's aware of where this is heading and he doesn't like it. And he's a legacy-minded person. So we've seen him call out Israel as a result of this too, multiple times in the past. Operation Midnight Hammer, he tries to work out the deal, and he says, I don't know. He's like, both countries don't know what the fuck they're doing, he says last year. He was talking about Israel in that sentence. We see him call them out this year as well, saying Benjamin Netanyahu will behave, and they're doing this, and they need to stop. So he has called them out. It's just he always reverts back to cucking to them in the long run, at least as of right now. And now there are reports as well that the Trump administration, in addition to all of this, seems to be secretly speaking to rival parties and political figures in Israel that are trying to rise up and run against Benjamin Netanyahu. Of which, by the way, I would not be surprised if that story is true. Nobody likes Benjamin Netanyahu. Nobody. Trump never did. But now he has to pretend like he does. So recognize that and more. And this leads me to the final thing I wanted to talk about tonight that I've been promising all week long on this channel I would. And I've just wanted to put it off because you can only talk about this stuff for so long. It just gets repetitive and boring and really frustrating, especially when you're as intellectually superior as I am, which is, again, why you should subscribe right now to American Advocates. You literally won't find better information than this, a better analysis than this on YouTube anywhere. It's not even close. Like the stream if you haven't already as well. Double tap those phone screens. It's free to do. It's no excuse for you goy scum to be sitting here with your thumbs up your asses. Pull them out. Hover them over your phone screen, double tap. It's free. Hit the thumbs up button. Seriously, it's pathetic. But that leads me to the final story I wanted to discuss. The latest developments that we saw from President Donald Trump at the 2026 NATO summit. All of that ties into this. The manipulation, the Iran war, the grievances with Israel and Zionism, and everything. The possible collapse and ushering in of the Great Depression. All of that fits in here. First of all, Trump, out of nowhere, discusses Spain and announces, just seemingly almost out of the blue in the clip I saw, oh yeah, there's Spain as well, and we're gonna cut off all trade. Excuse me. That voice is hard to maintain. Cut off all trade from Spain, all of it. Well, let me explain something to you here. Let me grab some water first too. First of all, on paper, there's an on-paper reason why he did this with Spain, and then there's a behind-the-scenes deeper meaning behind why he did this with Spain that most people won't be able to recognize because they're just intellectually inferior goyim who worship Israel. So that's your hint as to the behind-the-scenes reason why. But let's get to the on-paper reason why. We know Trump has been a stickler with NATO, and rightfully so in many ways. NATO has relied on us footing the bill for all of their military defense and safety, and it's not like they've ever repaid us for that. They actually grandstand against us in their education system, and their world leaders do it, and they always act like America's this horrendous nation, but we foot the bill for their defense the entire time. Under Trump, and I give him praise for this in some ways, somewhat so, Trump has really forced them to finally come to the table more and contribute to their own national defense as it was agreed upon when NATO was formed. Which, by the way, if you don't know the history of NATO, read it. It's fascinating. As it would turn out, NATO has actually already gone on for about 60 years too long. It really was only ever intended to be a 10-year thing to keep Europe safe from the advancement of Russia post World War II after the downfall of Adolf Hitler in Germany. General Eisenhower himself at the time, who was a key player in NATO, even said this. He said, if NATO has gone on for more than 10 years, it is a failure and should be dissolved immediately. And somehow, through corruption and weak leadership in America, we not only allowed NATO to exist way longer than it should have, but over time allowed all of the world leaders involved in NATO to rely on us for their defense budgets and spending and military protection, while they then take that money that they should be spending and use it to build these utopians, perfect little socialist societies. Oh, they have free healthcare over there. Oh, yeah, we subsidize literally fucking all of that. Your money goes to paying for their healthcare. Okay? We know this because of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as well. We literally are changing the way it's done when it comes to the pharmacy and how we footed the bill with that too. So that's just facts. Trump, to his credit, has forced them to change that. So most countries in NATO are now finally meeting the 5% annual defense budget threshold when it comes to them spending that much of their GDP per year towards their own defense. Spain is the only country that hasn't. Those greedy fuckers want to sit still at 2% or less, really, every single year. And in doing so, they're now forcing all the rest of NATO to subsidize them. Scum. And here's the deal. That's the on paper reason why Trump said this. Cut all trade from Spain. It's to punish them for this, but there's a deeper meaning behind it as well. The on paper reason is now the justification. But in truth, here's the other thing with Spain. Spain in NATO has become perhaps one of the most outspoken anti-Israel critics in NATO out there. Maybe Italy is starting to rival them. But Spain is really, I mean, during this war and everything else, we saw images and videos from Spain. There are people dancing on Israeli flags. I think it was Spain that tore down the wax statue of Benjamin Netanyahu and bashed its head in and melted it down. They are very displeased with Israel. And so at this NATO summit, Trump kind of uses the whole, well, they're still at only 2% spending when they should be at 5%, cut off all trade from them. On paper, that gets to be the reason. But in my opinion, behind the scenes, what we are seeing here is a little bit more Zionist cucking from Trump and kind of punishing Spain, throwing Israel a bone, because there is a rift between Israel and America, between Trump and Netanyahu. And I'm going to explain all of that in a second, because that's where we get into Turkey and Syria. But at the same time, Trump will kind of, he's a conflicted man, and he's being manipulated, but he's conflicted internally between right and wrong and between what he knows is good and bad. And really, he almost in my opinion, he probably almost feels like he has to do this. So it is Zionist cucking, and it is punishing Spain, in my opinion. Really, the deeper meaning is you're outspoken against Israel, and that's unacceptable. Israel, by the way, which is not part of NATO, and really their last ally left is us. Everyone else hates them. Spain just really hates them. But moving away from the Zionist cucking here, where we see Trump's conflict, the nature of him being conflicted, the Miriam Adelson money buying the war and the Zionist influence in the government and the possible blackmail centered around Epstein, as made evident by his own wife doing that press conference, coincidentally after peace was announced with Iran, literally like 2 days after, and just everything else that we're seeing here, we do see Trump getting increasingly frustrated with Israel and Netanyahu, and though he can't really openly do too much about it, in my opinion, the news that came after Spain at the NATO summit, the news with Turkey and subsequently Syria, I think points to Trump kind of like giving Israel a behind-the-scenes backhand slap for their actions. Because Trump is pissed at Israel for the false intelligence that led to this Iran war. And though it really is Trump's fault for literally disregarding the advice from Marco Rubio, J.D. Vance, General Kane, and many others, and Tulsi Gabbard's intel, and instead leaning towards the IDF intelligence, which he should have known better than to trust. So it is Trump's kind of fault. He still is going to be pissed at Israel for it to begin with, who lured us into the Middle East and then kind of forced us to attack Iran. And so he's frustrated. And so this whole thing with Turkey now, And if you don't know what I'm alluding to here, Trump also announced at the 2026 NATO summit that he would be sort of floating this idea of selling Turkey our military equipment, and by that I mean our stealth fighter jets, the F-35 stealth fighter jets, some of the best fighter jets on the market that we use in our superior air force. He floated this idea, as mentioned by President Erdogan of Turkey, that we were going to be selling them 5 fighter jets. And Erdogan even went on to say, and Trump always follows through on his promises, so I have faith in Trump to follow through on this. Here's why this is being done, in my opinion, to spite Israel. When we started the war with Iran back in the first week of March there, for the most part, Israel immediately, within 4 days, I think, or less, began their invasion in Lebanon. And you have to understand really what this is about. If you don't see it, then you can't follow this. It's about greater Israel. It always has been. Weakening Iran is just to remove the counterbalance of the Middle East that threatens Israel's greater Israel project advancements. Because Lebanon has Hezbollah residing within it, and Hezbollah is allied to Iran. And the Houthis south in Yemen are allied with Iran. And then there's also Hamas. And in Turkey, we see Israel really starting to point in the direction of Turkey as well. So recognize what happens. Israel purchases this war with Miriam Adelson's $240 million campaign donation to Trump in 2023-2024. The war is now underway. Iran is now being weakened, which is good for Israel hypothetically. Now, tragically, for Israel's sake, and ironically so, as I've explained, Iran is actually poised to emerge from this better off and more powerful within the next decade, which is worse for Israel. And that I would call justice, truthfully. But nevertheless, this was the initial plan. Israel then uses this war between the United States and Iran as both an excuse and a distraction, really, to do what they're doing in Lebanon, because they believe that that land was promised to them 3,000 years ago. This country that was literally formed in 1948 believes this, but that's what they believe. So they go up into Lebanon literally within days of us waging war against Iran. They tell us, oh no, our IDF, they won't be joining and fighting side by side with our greatest ally. We're not actually going to send IDF soldiers to fight and die alongside the Goyim. That is highly offensive. One Israeli soldier's life is worth literally 1,000 of yours, you scum. You will distract Iran and weaken them for us. We're going into Lebanon. And they were banking on the Hezbollah presence in Lebanon responding to the strikes on Iran because they're in an alliance. And Hezbollah didn't disappoint. They launched attacks on Israel, and Israel said, aha, see that? This is our neighbor. This is what we're dealing with. We can't live like this. Boom, up into Lebanon they go. And this was always part of the plan. And now they've taken southern Lebanon, and they're creating their yellow lines, they call it, for a perimeter of safety that lessens the chance of Hezbollah being able to effectively strike Israel's mainland. But really what we see them doing in Lebanon is what they've done in Gaza. They're never giving that land back because they believe in the expansionism. They believe in expanding in the Middle East and fulfilling the Greater Israel Project. So they do this in Lebanon. What we then see in that same week is not only them goad us into a war with Iran, immediately expand into Lebanon and start a war of their own with Hezbollah, but they also have the nerve at the time, and I reported on it back then, to point to Turkey, proverbially, to us and say, hey, by the way, when you're done with Iran, Turkey's next. They're going to be a big problem. But here's the issue. There's many issues with that. First of all, Turkey's a member of NATO, and we're a member. We're all NATO. Israel's actually the only country involved in all this that's not a member with NATO. Israel doesn't want to be bound by any more handcuffs. They already consider America to be the golden handcuff. Israel's not a part of NATO, and really I don't think they can be a part of NATO. It's the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. But either way, so pointing us to Turkey is asking us to literally attack our own NATO ally. But they are desperate to remove Turkey as a problem next after Iran. Now, obviously, with the benefit of hindsight being in July rather than in March, we know we have failed with Iran. We lost the war. It's over. Iran's going to be better off for this. And Israel, by extension, is defeated, lost, and really in a compromising position now. And so that is why, though, the fact that they did that, and they still keep talking about it, they've actually, the past 2 weeks, they've actually ramped up their rhetoric on Turkey. Rather than developing some sort of self-awareness in all this and deciding maybe we should cool the rhetoric about Turkey, they've actually ramped up the rhetoric and said Turkey's a huge problem. Turkey's a huge problem, and they're going to threaten us soon. You got to do something. So for Trump to respond at NATO the way that he did, openly discussing the sale of our U.S. F-35 stealth fighter jets to Turkey, is a massive slap in the face to Israel. And in and of itself, it creates this statement. It generates this statement that's very obvious subliminally, if you know all of that context history, to understand that that is Trump flipping off Israel. That is a big fuck you to Israel from Trump. It's not only will we not be fighting Turkey, our NATO ally, for you, but this Iran war has been a disaster, so fuck you for that. And in addition, we're now going to possibly sell stuff to Turkey. Now, here's the deal on that, too, and I'll put this out as a disclaimer. I highly doubt that that will ever happen. And the reason why is because Congress controls the purse, and by extension, Congress would have to approve and decide to sell those F-35 fighter jets to Turkey. And here's why that can't happen. First of all, the obvious. Congress is 94% AIPAC controlled, which means it's controlled by Israel on both the Democrat and Republican side of the aisle. And while they're losing that control very quickly, they still control it for the most part right now. It'll be about 6 to 8 years, in my opinion, before Israel's really lost a lot of control in our government. So just that alone should indicate to you that Congress will just never approve it. But additionally, we actually have it written in to law here in the United States that we can't sell military equipment to any country other than Israel if that equipment gives that country that we're selling it to a potential military advantage over Israel. So it's literally not even legal, and therefore it actually gives Congress the right to literally put a stop and tell the president no. And how ironic would it be if Trump continues to push for this as we approach midterms in disastrous fashion? A blue wave is imminent, but how ironic would it be that the last act of a red Congress that represents Republicans having complete control of the government and still failing with the economy and failing to get anything done that benefits the American people for the most part, how ironic would it be if one of Congress's last actions as a red Congress is telling Trump no and denying him and then losing in the midterms? Ridiculously ironic. I almost look forward to it, and I say that as a conservative. But fuck this administration and this Congress. They're widely ineffective, and they deserve to lose. But that's why it won't happen. Congress is controlled by AIPAC, and it's already written into our law, essentially, that we can't sell military equipment to another country that would then potentially give that country a military edge over Israel. That's already a law. So that's the thing. But it's just the gesture in and of itself that Trump would even float this idea to Turkey. That is the slap in the face. And it's really subliminal messaging to Israel that, hey, fuck you for getting us involved in this unwinnable Iran war that's ruining my presidential legacy, destroying the reputation of America, harming our military credibility, etc. But in addition to that, the other thing too is Turkey is taking it seriously enough to where we've already cited one of the conflict of interest being Turkey owns Russian fighter jets. And we lost a little connectivity there, but I'm back. The hypothesis was that if they had their Russian fighter jets, they would try to basically compromise our security by utilizing the intel that they gather on our fighter jets and blend it together or provide Russia with more, and we don't like that. And so in a way, this is almost a win on part two because Turkey took it so seriously that they sold the jets back to Russia, and they really do want to cozy up with the U.S., which in my opinion is good. I'm not a huge Turkey fan, but they are a member of NATO, and they're a problematic member of NATO. But I would rather us focus on NATO a little bit more than I would have even advocated for last fall when I really hated NATO, than focusing on being best friends with our greatest ally, Israel. This all leads me to the final thing I want to talk about, and that's Syria. And this is where it gets even deeper, too. Because even if Trump can't sell the fighter jets to Turkey, and I like I just explained, Congress won't allow it, I think it's 95% certain that will never, we're just not doing it. Trump can't do it. But Trump is seeking to actively benefit and help out Turkey in many different ways. So the fighter jets won't work. Okay, Syria is now on the table, and this is significant for Turkey. Trump at the 2026 NATO summit, as another big slap in the face to Israel, truthfully, basically mentioned how the United States, he said it alongside Marco Rubio, was going to be delisting Syria as a terrorist nation. We're no longer going to recognize Syria as a terrorist country in the Middle East anymore here in the United States. How does this benefit Turkey? Well, because President Erdogan essentially wants full control of Syria. And so, being our NATO ally, and now with us basically delisting Syria from the terrorist watch list, this unlocks the door now for Turkey for first of all, massive reconstruction money to now pour into Syria. And you have to know the military history going on behind the scenes in Syria. We were once again led there off bad intelligence, but it seems like we may have been able to take all of the cracked eggs and make some sort of omelet out of this, at least for now. This will then allow, though, delisting them, for all this reconstruction money to pour into Syria. This will benefit the elites, by the way. It's kind of the same concept happening with Iran, and why Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner all of a sudden want peace, because they want the real estate contracts to go towards Iran that they'll pick up and benefit off of and profit off of. It's going to be kind of the same thing with Syria, but really what's going to happen in this case is Turkey will be perfectly positioned to hoover up most of that money that's poured into Syria for reconstruction. And Turkey already has a lot of military bases spread across large parts of Syria as it is, so they already have partial control on Syria to begin with. Now, they control the key border regions. They've been shaping the new government in Syria since day one as a result. And now with sanctions being lifted and Syria being delisted as a terrorist country here in America, Turkish companies can now swoop in and basically dominate the rebuilding contracts and construction. They'll take control of the infrastructure. They'll take control of the energy. And basically they'll turn Syria into like an economic colony for them, for Ankara. And this strengthens Turkey infinitely so. Turkey to the north of Israel, Iran to the east. Iran is now poised, like I said, to emerge better off for this if they control the Strait of Hormuz especially, and if the MOU holds, which it looks like it won't actually. But they're going to benefit one way or another. They survived. They've proven that America's not as powerful as we project to the world. And if they control the Strait of Hormuz, I've done the math on it before, they will profit anywhere between $50 billion to $100 billion of extra generated revenue annually if they charge a toll for the Strait of Hormuz and restore the Strait of Hormuz to full capacity. This money will be used to beef up their military because if it's $100 billion, that is currently 3 times their military defense budget. And even if it's only $50 billion, then that's 1.5 times the budget. It's also $100 billion is already 1/3 of their total annual GDP. So they'd just be getting a 33% GDP bump. This money will go towards their military, towards beefing up their country, their economy, their military, and towards their allies like Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. So Iran's already going to be stronger because of this, which threatens Israel's security a lot. And now Trump doing what he's doing in Syria will benefit Turkey, which Israel's already telling us is going to be a big problem for them to their north. So just recognize that's what's really happening here. This also, by the way, will let Turkey push their own Sunni Islamist allies deeper into power in Damascus too. And it kind of keeps the Kurds crushed quite a bit because the Kurds in Iraq are no fan of Turkey either. So this is very fascinating, all of this. And for Erdogan, President Erdogan of Turkey, it's a massive win either way. Maybe he doesn't get the fighter jets, and he'll definitely be pissed if he doesn't. But he will definitely win more territory and money and regional power, and it's all coming at Israel's expense. And these are the subliminal messages being sent in these statements and actions, not just to Iran and Israel, but actually also to us as well, if you really look at it right. This statement and all of these actions being taken really highlight just how conflicted President Donald Trump is in office. He's sort of a purchased man, possibly a blackmailed man, so he's a Zionist cuck. But like I said, and though this doesn't really bring it's not going to bring too much solace to the situation or provide you with too much peace. Right now, it's important to point this out because it demonstrates a game that's being played behind the scenes right now with Trump. He knows what's right. He knows what's good for America. And in my opinion, I do think Trump at his core is an American nationalist, and I do think he loves our country. But I also think because of what we saw under the Biden administration post his first term, the lawfare, And really, what we're seeing now with Iran, I think it's very clear that he's a compromised human being who's now in an administration that, in many ways, is even worse than his first administration, filled with manipulators, filled with self interested people who don't care about our country, don't care about Trump's legacy, and don't even really care about Israel or Iran, but in many cases do care about Israel. And I think he's being pulled every which way, doesn't know what to do. He's getting older. He's 80 years old. He's tired. He's not the same Trump from 2016. And so that's the whole picture that I wanted to paint tonight, while also explaining to you the geopolitics, and as I see it at least, that's currently taking place all over the world right now to fill you guys in. So hopefully you guys appreciated that. Be sure to subscribe to American Advocates for more content like this. I go live every single night, Sunday through Friday, and like today, Saturdays too. Also like the stream if you'd be so kind, especially if you enjoyed that analysis. Double tap your phone screens, hit the thumbs up button. It's free to do, and it really does help YouTube push this show out to more people who need to see this. And other than that, I'll take a look at a few chats here. Take a look at a few comments down below from anybody. If there's anything good. There's a lot of, like, when the algorithm was pushing the show, it didn't push me at all last night. I had like 30 concurrent viewers. And then all of a sudden tonight it pushes me again. And when it's pushing me, the unfortunate side effect is there's a lot of swine. There's a lot of swine in the chat. A lot of goyim. A lot of 85 IQers. And like the Bible says, I don't cast my pearls to swine. So a lot of you, much like how you were with your fathers, and in many cases your mothers, or in some cases both your mothers, a lot of you will still be ignored. But if there's anything worth reading, I'll take a look at it. Hey, Paint Code, good to see you, man. One of the channel's members are in the chat right now, and I appreciate seeing that. Appreciate you guys. Yeah, if you're a longtime subscriber, or if you really enjoyed that content, consider becoming a member today. I would caution you though on that, because I am a very extreme right-wing conservative. I'm very critical of Trump because I am a logical human being who's intellectually superior to most of MAGA, and I can recognize mistakes, and I feel like it's actually our duty to actually call out the people we vote for even more than the ones we didn't vote for. So that's what I do. So don't mistake me as a liberal. My hair's not blue. I'm not 300 pounds. You know, I'm perfectly happy with my genitals the way they are. I don't feel like a woman today. So I am not a liberal, and I want to make that abundantly clear. But if you're enjoying this and you feel like you can agree with my political views and you appreciate this analysis, subscribe and consider becoming a member. Coyote3 says, we get it. Trump is the talking point. We don't everything the same, but I appreciate it. Well, thank you, Coyote. I appreciate that. Hey, Selena Girl, one of my regular viewers, is in here too. She says, Giorgia Meloni, the Italian prime minister, the only real man, the only real man in Europe. Well, hey, you know, as a sexist myself, I do tend to have a problem with watching female authority. I believe that women rising up into power is more oftentimes a curse to a nation. But I will give Giorgia Meloni her dues, because she's refused in the past to shake hands with Benjamin Netanyahu. And the second that Israel started doing all of this, reportedly Italy decided to pull their version of foreign aid that they send routinely to Israel. I wish we could do that. So I will give her dues. She does deserve that. And I can respect that in a way. Kathy Morgan, one of my other regular viewers, says Trump picks the losers to make them look good. Now, I don't believe that. That's just a little bit too TDS-y, Kathy. Come on now. Where's your head at, woman? No, he picks the losers because, in my opinion, I think he's just easily sold on personality and on charisma and on looks. And I think he's a bit too superficial for his own good. I think he's the worst judge of character perhaps I've ever seen in my life. And in this case, I think a lot of those Zionist dollars went towards kind of guiding him down who he should pick as well. You know, sometimes I'll watch him talking about things and hosting these events that should have nothing to do with commerce, and yet Howard Lutnick's there. And I just think to myself, Or Jared Kushner. I know he's the son-in-law that married his favorite daughter, but it's like no official title in that administration. And yet Jared Kushner seems to be there quite a bit and has a lot of sway. A lot more sway than he should for having no title. And so, you know, that's a different factor this time around than it was last time. But last time, that wasn't the excuse. Last time, the real reason was Trump wasn't a politician, was inexperienced, and again, just seems to be a very bad judge of character. Iran is going to send the oil over their borders. I wonder how many friendly countries are going to be letting them do that. It's not a matter of, I know what you're getting at here, and this is a double-edged sword strategy of Iran's scorched earth policy here. Is yeah, they're not really helping their cause by striking all of the Persian Gulf states every time America pisses them off. And you do have to recognize that there is some truth in what you're saying, Coyote. Yeah, that could be a problem for them. But ultimately, it's not Iran. It's not Iran as a country that has the leverage. It's the Strait of Hormuz that has the leverage. And it's Iran that controls it now. And so that's why the countries will allow it. It's because they have to. It's not because they'll want to. Saudi Arabia was encouraging Trump to start the war with Iran until they realized that we couldn't finish the job. Same with the Emiratis. So it's not about that. It's not about how well liked Iran is. Iran doesn't care about that. Iran recognizes that if they can seize control of the Strait of Hormuz, they can bend the will of all of the Persian Gulf nations to them. Ruling over something is not about being liked or even respected. You can rule over people and over something by just being feared. And that's the game that Iran is trying to play. And that's why it's a double-edged strategy. It could backfire against them, but not really. I know people have talked about, they're like, well, the Saudis will just develop more oil pipelines underground that will allow them to bypass Hormuz right to the other side at Bab el-Mandeb. It's like, okay, I know they have the east to west pipeline already, and they could try another one. It won't make up for the sheer volume that passes through the strait. This is just a naturally occurring artery in the Middle East, and it just can't be bypassed quick enough or effectively enough to ever undo the importance of it. That's what you have to understand. Bemerald says, "Sir, why do Americans team up with Pakistan and at the same time talk about anti-terrorism?" Well, because Pakistan has recognized their terrible positioning in all of this, being a non-oil producing nation that's kind of just reliant on oil passing through their country, which obviously isn't happening anymore. And so Pakistan has recognized that their best bet is to be the mediators, and rightfully so, actually. So Pakistan's probably not doing very well right now. They don't really even have reserves. XM8 Lover says subscribe. Thank you for that. I appreciate that a lot. P9735 says, I don't care about this anymore. Turn the whole country to glass. Time to get back to fixing America. Well, I agree with the last part of your statement there. Yes, time to get back to America first. I don't agree with anything else you said. Bear thou, bear thou, I never know how to say your name, but bear the mass. We'll just say that. Bear. You're Bear from now on. And I recognize your username, if this is not your first time being here. So thanks for coming back. Being a casual, we'll call you a casual viewer, because I don't see you in my chat enough, Bear. We need more support here. But I appreciate you being here now. And he says, we don't see eye to eye on everything, but I enjoy the chat and listening to all of your points. Thank you. And I really do appreciate that a lot. Richard Jennifer says, at least say what you think is a good idea. Anywhere, what would you do? You're like Colbert. Yeah, so Richard Jennifer. First of all, what kind of username is that? Were you creating your YouTube account and then your nagging, domineering bitch wife said, excuse me, that's going to be a joint YouTube account because I want to see everything you're doing. I've had enough of you, Richard, going on and watching all of those anime girls on your YouTube. Just because I don't want to have sex with you anymore doesn't mean you get to... My imagination's pretty wild. But what kind of name is that? Richard Jennifer? Come on now. And secondly, you say, at least say what a good idea is. Yeah, clearly you haven't watched my content at length. I've already offered solutions. Not only have I predicted entire ceasefires happening before they've happened in this region, and I did that, by the way, by just literally modeling Trump's prior China tariff war last year. If you want to be able to predict and be as smart as I am, it's all about pattern recognition. And if you don't have a high enough IQ, you can't do that. But You can take what I'm saying here and figure it out for yourself. Look to the China tariff war. This has just gone on way too long. Unlike the China tariff war, which Trump tacoed out of eventually, kind of, the same strategies and tactics were on display. You rant like a lunatic on social media in all caps and threaten the country, and then you claim that the country is negotiating with you. All the while, the country literally says, conversely, we don't know what he's talking about. We're not even talking with the White House administration. But you continue to insist it. And then you basically say, well, I don't like the way they're negotiating. They're scum. We're going to attack them. Last year, that came in the form of tariffs, in the form of, 185%, which as an American, I actually kind of enjoyed. I actually like tariffs as a concept. Trump implemented them horribly, as it turns out, which sucks. But I also enjoyed watching China squirm a little bit when all of a sudden they were facing huge tariff percentages. But that's what happens. You implement the tariffs based off of negotiations not going well that the other country insisted never happened. This is what happened with Iran. It's the same thing. It's happening now. The country then responds to your tariffs, and they impose tariffs of their own. Iran responds to your strikes by striking you back. Trump then goes to the media and says, you see that? They negotiated in bad faith over a bad deal. We then rightfully responded, and now they're attacking us. We got to go to war with them. He did it with China. He's doing it with Iran. So then you go to war. And then you claim down the line, oh, the country actually wants peace now. They want peace. We annihilated them. We destroyed them. They want peace. The country then says, like we saw with China, we never said that. We don't want peace. We don't care. Iran said the same thing. We don't want peace. We don't care. One thing leads to another. The cycle repeats like this for a while. Peace claims, negotiation claims, strikes, peace, strikes, peace. Then there's actual peace. And with China, thankfully, it actually ended sooner than it was, and we left some sort of base level tariffs on them for a while until the Supreme Court struck it down, and now Trump's battling that too. With Iran, it's different because this is actual physical war. So you have to know when the comparison's no longer appropriate. And in this case, you use it to predict. It's how I literally predicted ceasefires on this channel. People came to me and they're like, dude, you're a prophet. You're a prophet. How'd you know there's going to be a ceasefire? I literally was like, yeah, I predicted that 2 days ago. It's obvious. The pattern is obvious. I've predicted escalation as a result too. The pattern is obvious. But it's no longer appropriate now because now this has gone on way too long. This cycle keeps repeating itself. Trump can't find an exit. He can't get the symbolic victory like he was able to over China with the tariffs. And it's more obvious because we have satellite imagery that exposes the damage Iran has done on our military base. They're going to control the Strait of Hormuz. And he can't just sell it at the podium as, well, look at that. China caved and we have tariffs in place still. And MAGA goes, oh, wow, the deal maker in chief. And I love tariffs, by the way. I'm saying this as somebody who likes tariffs and voted for Trump. He didn't handle it great, and he implemented the tariffs poorly. And with this war, he's prosecuted the war horrendously. The strategy has been non-existent. It's all been reactionary stuff or reactive stuff. All Trump has been reduced to is just reacting to everything Iran does, which tells me there's no more forethought. There's no more analyzing going on or strategy. It's all just reacting now to Iran. And so that's the difference now, and that's where you split off from the pattern of the China tariff war, and you recognize at this point, hey, I can't keep making predictions because now even I don't know what's going to happen. I look at this, and I just think about all of the worst-case scenarios, and I really do recognize, while being, believe it or not, an actual optimist, it doesn't seem like it on this channel, but I wake up happy every day, and I am an optimist. I truly, believe me. But I also just recognize at the same time, every option Trump has right now is terrible. And it's gotten to a point, like I've advocated for in my long form video I have up on this channel, the best thing Trump really could do now is actually just leave. Yes, they'll control the strait, but they're going to do it anyway, and we can't stop them. And yes, leaving means that it looks like we've kind of lost. Trump could kind of reframe it as, well, we bombed them into oblivion, a shell of their former self, and we're out of there. Time to focus on America first. And then the MAGA goes, just in time for midterms. See that? And they'll eat it up either way. But that's the best case scenario because really, if you read the MOU, like I've explained multiple times, it's a surrender document. Not only is leaving bad because leaving is bad because it's an obvious L to anybody informed, but at least you're done and you can focus on America again. And the worst thing that happens is they control the strait. But making peace with Iran on their terms, like Trump did with the MOU, now not only is it an obvious loss and they control the strait, but we also give them $300 billion in real estate reparations, and we lift sanctions off of them and secondary sanctions, and we unfreeze billions of dollars of assets. So it's like they win way more, actually, by adhering to the MOU. And they also win if we go back to war with them, because we're just going to deplete and bleed our economy dry while they just continue to survive. And as I stated, day one of this war, the only thing Iran needs to do to win this is just survive. Their standard of victory is much lower. So that means, by default, in my opinion, the only real solution to this is to just walk away at this point. I wouldn't have advocated for that even 2 months ago, though. But because this has gone on now in this vicious, repetitive, frustrating, tedious, boring cycle that is just inducing Middle East fatigue in my heart and soul every day more and more, because it's gone on for too long now, that is the only option really left on the table, in my opinion. Just leave. All they get is the Strait of Hormuz. Then they at least don't get the 300 billion. They at least don't get the sanctions lifted. They at least don't get the unfrozen assets in the form of tens of billions of dollars more. That's more of a loss for Iran, who, in my opinion, by the way, and that leads me to my next point, Iran is playing it a little too cute. I actually think Iran's now almost shooting themselves in the foot by refusing to allow Trump any form of symbolic victory. If this MOU holds, Iran is going to be a fourth emerging global power player in the next decade, not even. But if this MOU doesn't hold and Trump does figure out what I'm saying here and heeds my wisdom here on this channel, which is why he should be watching it, but Susie Wiles will never allow that. But if he actually heeds my wisdom, because I'm literally the smartest being you've ever laid eyes on, which is why you should subscribe right now to this channel and like the stream, it's not even close. If he actually walks away and undoes the MOU, Iran's actually worse off then. Like, they're actually getting a lot more with the MOU being intact, but now Trump is so spited and angry that it seems like the MOU will collapse. So Iran may have flown a little too close to the sun too. And Iran has been strategically brilliant throughout all of this, as I've explained. Their 5D chess game against Israel, using Trump as their pawn and refocusing all of the attention on the Strait of Hormuz instead of on their nuclear program, like we were originally told this war was about, and everything else. But now I think we're starting to actually see Iran make its first mistake, possibly. They should just leave well enough alone, objectively speaking. But they haven't done that. And they're playing just a little too spiteful now. Okay, I don't have a moderator in chat right now, but this is definitely someone. We don't tolerate the spam here. And if I have to remove you, you're just getting banned. My moderator will put you in a timeout, but when you spam and there's no law enforcement with my moderators, you just get fucking banned. I'm a free speech absolutist, but I'm not a spam absolutist. Conduct yourself appropriately in chat, retard. Sure, I literally answered the question too. Absolute fucking retard. Trump's Vietnam top 10 says God mind. Yeah. Iraq 2003 all over again, right? Which is what I said this war would turn into as well. Hey, Adam Monicus is in here. Good to see him in here. Another regular viewer. He says, what do you see as the best case scenario for America in this conflict? Well, I probably, before seeing your question, I think I just explained that. And it is just walking away, because otherwise it's boots on the ground war or nuking Iran if the generals in the military would even agree to turn the key on that, which they might not, weirdly enough. And so it's like war is a terrible idea for us. And so the best case scenario is like walking away, truthfully. Sean McCoy says the Export Arms Control Act allows sales of weapons to any nation. You're probably a little bit behind on the stream where I'm still talking about Turkey and the fighter jets and the defiance of Israel. But we have it worked into our Congress where, yes, we can sell our arms to any nation, but not if Israel doesn't have access to that technology. And to my knowledge, we have not yet provided Israel with any F-35 fighter jet technology, which means we'd be giving Turkey a deliberate military advantage over Israel, which is technically against the law, believe it or not, or, against the acts that prohibit that. As our AIPAC Zionist-controlled Congress will definitely cite that to prohibit it, so. Jerome Newry says if Trump comes back from Iran without being able to inspect them, it will be a loss for. Well, yeah, this is. I mean, I understand, and if he walks away, that's a guarantee. But I mean, what else are we supposed to do? Iran's now floating the idea of intentionally pursuing nukes. And it's like, again, okay, if they do that, what's our answer? Well, either walk away or now it just means full-fledged boots on the ground war. And that's going to be costly. It'll shatter the U.S. economy. It will shatter the Republican Party, and it will destroy Trump's legacy. He will be known as George Bush 2.0. He pretty much already is. That will just finalize it. See, that's a bit of a chud thing, Coyote. Tariffs worked great post 1913. No, they worked great pre 1913 for obvious reasons. You actually have to understand what managed decline actually is. You have to understand the whole purpose of World War One and World War Two, the Great Depression that was ushered in. You don't understand it. And people always cite the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act as the thing that started the Great Depression, and that's actually not even true. That Smoot-Hawley Tariffs Act made it worse because it was issued a year after the Great Depression started, born out of desperation, when every other country was suffering economically too. So they looked at that and they said, we're not going to participate then, and rightfully so. But the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, people always erroneously say that. They go, the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act started the Great Depression. No, the fuck it didn't. It came a year after. Literally a year after. The Great Depression had already started, and it had nothing to do with tariffs, the Great Depression. Nothing. The tariffs, in fact, are how this nation rose to prominence. There was no IRS or tax. In the 1800s, we capitalized off the Industrial Revolution, and we used the tariffs to generate a lot of income revenue for our government and for the building of our infrastructure and our supply chain and the construction of factories. It was the best formula, and they need to come back, the tariffs do, because we're in another revolution right now. Even though I don't even fully support AI, you have to recognize what this is, and the fourth turning and a revolution on the verge of that, and we need to also bring jobs back. And so tariffs, when implemented correctly, are the way. They're the way, rather than being tax cattle. And that's the most ridiculous thing about liberals. They'll talk about hating Israel, but it's like, you're just the goy. Liberals are the goy. Liberals support everything that Zionism loves. You're tax cattle. You're tax cattle because tariffs aren't implemented, and you push for all of the social causes that the Jews love. They love feminism. They love the destruction of the family. They love abortion. Israel prizes itself on being an abortion country. Like, you don't know. You're like, the liberals don't even understand this. They think that they hate Israel, but it's like, no, you're just the weapon of it, and you're too stupid to realize it. You're the weapon of Zionism. You love your open borders that literally ushers in all of the third world immigrants that replace us, that Zionism literally wants. The Zionist doctrine wants Europe gone. They despise Europe. Hardcore Orthodox Jews and rabbinic, they despise Europe. They'll never forgive the Second Temple being destroyed by Rome, and Rome is Europe, and America's an extension therein. And so they want to just replace it. They want to replace Rome with foreigners. So, yeah. Tariffs work great post 1913. Please, you got to educate yourself a little bit more here. If the strait stays closed, millions will starve, mostly in sub-Saharan Africa. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we're always going to be more insulated on that here in the United States. We don't rely on the strait for nearly as much oil, but it will affect us, and it will harm us severely. It's just we won't starve to death over here. We'll just walk around bitching and moaning about the massively increased cost of living and inflation going up, and it'll cost Republicans, rightfully so, in midterms and probably in 2028 if it goes that far. You're going to just see blue all over the place, and that'll be the extent of it for us. But yeah, in sub-Saharan Africa, yeah, fertilizer is dependent on oil, and they can't grow their crops, and it's not like they go to grocery stores there. They need the farmers. They need the crops. So yeah, they'll literally starve. There will be a famine in places like sub-Saharan Africa. That is true. Going on for too long. It should have never started. Well, I agree with that, Vernon, but I'm just saying now it's gone on for too long. Recognizing that it should have never started but did, now you recognize that it's gone on for way too long. The unfrozen assets were already theirs. Yeah, but I don't give a shit about that. Fuck Iran. You're right, but fuck them. Adamonica says, we win more by leaving and could play the hero by ending our losses and they get no money, no treaties. Yeah. The military and people will uprise, leave it closed. Oh, God. You really believe that? I kind of like you, Coyote, but you're kind of a chud. Jerome Newry says Israel is not going to stop. They're not, and that's why we should just divorce ourselves from Israel and leave the Middle East. Israel will stop when Big Brother's not protecting them anymore. You want the answer to peace? Divorce from Israel as a country, stop the foreign aid, no more military equipment, prevent Section 224 of the NDAA and Section 612 of the Senate Intelligence Act. No mergers with our intelligence with Israel. No Israeli tech integrated in our military. All foreign aid ends. We leave the region. We deconstruct military bases in the Middle East. We keep military base. By the way, we need to project power as a global hegemony. I'm not a full-on isolationist, but circle the Middle East with the bases and pull out of the region. And watch how quickly Israel behaves itself. And then watch how quickly, by extent, peace is ushered into the Middle East. That's the ironic actual answer to, well, and I mean the Sunnis and the Shiites, they can't get their shit together. There will never be peace in the Middle East fully. But you want more peace in the Middle East. Cut the fig tree back down. The fig tree that bared no fruit in the Bible was cut down and the Gentiles were grafted on. And we, in 1948, manufactured the reconstruction of that. Is it any wonder why it's all chaos in that region? Cut it down again. Cut it down at its base. Chop it off. Landon Thompson says, I'm down with a lot of that, what you're saying. The self-glossing is a little much. Yeah, well, hey, if you were as smart as I was, you'd be talking about yourself the same way. Have a little bit of faith in yourself more. Maybe you should self-gloss a little bit more. Maybe you should start a YouTube channel and talk about these things like I do, the self-glossing. Isn't it glazing? Why are you talking like Ben Shapiro? Wow, ease up there on the glossing, pal. Isn't it glazing? Glossing? What the fuck? What am I, a basketball court? I'm glossing? Does this guy hate America? No, I'm literally a Christian American nationalist. You cannot believe anything Iran says. True. True. But what I will say is, when I view Iran and their statements being made, and I compare that to what's happened, they've pretty much told the truth more often than not. I don't believe, they launch all these strikes on Bahrain at one point, and they say, well, we don't know who did that. It's like, all right, they're lying. Iran's lying. But then they'll say stuff like, we're never giving up control of the Strait of Hormuz. We're not talking about peace with Trump. And the MOU is not being upheld. It's like, you look at all of that, and it's like, well, they're telling the truth. Who's lying more? Trump, actually. I don't even look at Trump on Truth Social nearly as much or watch his statements as much because Trump is lying. Trump is lying the most. Iran lies, yes. Trump lies the most. Sadly. Iran is 0.33% the size of lower USA and half. Yeah, so they're still a large country. We couldn't even, listen, Selena girl, we couldn't even take care of Iraq properly, which is infinitely smaller than Iran. So the size thing is not what you want to focus on here. Do I think taking control of Venezuela before attacking Iran was planned? I could entertain an argument for that because of the oil situation and stuff, but it doesn't always, that argument wouldn't hold up entirely. There's a lot of holes in it. Iran and China are two entirely different scenarios. Kind of. Wow, there are stupid people in here. Trump ass kissers with zero critical thinking skills. That's true, Nick. I'm a Trump voter. I just, too smart to be a MAGA cult at this point, really. See, why was Hashem's things, Israel has a black hole bomb? How was that hidden? I Paint Code, one of the members on this channel, says maybe Turkey is having dreams of the Ottoman Empire 2.0, which scares the hell out of Israel the most. Yeah. Yeah, imagine they take control of their straits now if they watch Iran do that and they decide to do it and we don't stop either of them. And we wind up giving them Syria, essentially, like Trump's talking about. Yeah, could be interesting. The Middle East, like I said, there's a new establishment, there's a new world order, perhaps not globally, but there is a new world order forming in the Middle East. That much is true. That is literally happening. Power balances are shifting, the establishment is crumbling, a new world order is forming in the Middle East, alliances are changing. It's very interesting. Paul Coomer says it was the Democrats that started the taxes. Yes, it was. And ironically, it's the Democrats that will still defend those to this day. Democrats love subjugation to the government. Tariffs, why would you ever support that? Why would you support tariffs when we can just give the government money? That's what I really want. That's the Democrats. I can't believe you would support tariff. You mean taking money from other countries? Why would you ever support that? We could just give our money to the government. I like being taxed. In fact, I wish they would raise our taxes. Well, really, we should tax the billionaires. We should tax we should tax the billionaires. They definitely would never leave and move out of the country to avoid those taxes, and they definitely wouldn't exploit every loophole possible still. We should just tax the billionaires. So retarded. The host is full of himself, thinking he is smarter than everyone else. Well, I am. We have sold F-35 jets to Israel. They have taken delivery of 48 of the first 50 with approved contracts of 2023 and 2026 to 100. Have they now? Democrats are stupid. They say tax the rich. Joke's on them. They must be the rich. Well, they're not. McCarthy John 100 says, tariffs aren't from other countries. Tariffs aren't from other countries, you moron. No, you're the moron. You're stuck on Economics 101. Yes, it's a tax on the importer, which gets passed on to the consumer. Sometimes. It's not by definition a tax because taxes can't be avoided. So you will pay your state and income taxes federally every year. You can't avoid it. You will pay your property taxes. Every tax that's out there can't be avoided. You make a purchase, you're taxed. Everything is a tax, and taxes are not avoidable. Tariffs can be avoided. In an ideal circumstance where our economy and infrastructure is built up enough and we're actually producing our own shit, then the tariffed goods that are coming in from other countries are taxed then, technically. But it's not actually a tax. The price just reflects on it. The importer paid more to import it. He then passes that on in the form of raising the price on the good. But if we're producing the same good, and this can't be applied to everything. We can't produce coffee here in the United States, for instance. So coffee, if it gets tariffs, will just be more expensive, and that pisses people off. But if we're talking about other products that we can produce, and yet we're importing a lot of it, but we're also producing it, then you can avoid paying the tariff increased cost on the imported version of that product by buying the American version that therefore won't be as expensive because it's not tariffed. And if you can do that, and you can avoid paying more for a product by paying less for the American produced one, which is ideally how our government and our economy should be set up predominantly, then you're not being taxed. You're choosing to either pay the tariff or not. That's the actual idea, and that goes above and beyond your little Google Economics 101 lesson for you, you cute little retard. Also, additionally, for what people don't want to admit here, but has now become more abundantly clear, as I've explained in the past on tariffs, yes, the importer pays it up front. Not always, though. So the importer pays it up front. Do they pass it on to the consumer always? No, actually. Sometimes to stay competitive, for reasons mentioned just prior to this, where there's competitive products American produced that are cheaper, the importer will have to eat the cost, which means you don't pay anything more. Or the importer will at least eat part of the cost, which means you won't pay as much. Additionally, when it comes to this, the exporters will recognize the value of the American marketplace being the most desirable place to sell on because we're a consumer nation. So sometimes the exporter and the importer will eat parts of the cost so that the consumer doesn't have to. And then you don't have to worry about it. And that therefore also means that even more so, it's not a tax. Now, additionally, how I know this is because when the Supreme Court struck down Trump's tariffs, not the tariffs themselves, by the way, which are not illegal, but they struck down Trump's implementation of the tariffs because he didn't implement them correctly using IEPA, etc., the Emergency International Powers Act. When they struck that down and ordered a refund, where we curiously saw some of that refund money going to was not just the importer. We saw refund money and refund claims being filed by Chinese and Philippine and Thailand exporters who said, well, hey, I absorbed some of that cost. And so that's how I know. It's not, by the way, I always knew this. Well, you goy idiots, you Google Economics 101 majors down in chat, it's a tax on the citizen because of the importer. I was always saying this, and I've just been vindicated in the process of all of it when you follow the currency. Refunds going to exporters. Why would that be? Why ever would that be? It's almost as if the exporters absorbed some or most or all of the costs in some instances, like they've done in the past. And when they do that, by the way, that proves to you that yes, we are taking money from other countries, quite literally. So, not in every case, but in some, at least some of the cases. And you're welcome for that lesson. And again, that's why you should like the stream and subscribe. I'm just infinitely smarter than all of you. It's not even close. You guys are so fucking stupid. You need this channel. Like, literally, you need this. I can only imagine how dumb you sound to your family and your even dumber friends. So like the stream and subscribe and tune in, because if you do, you can repeat talking points like that to your even dumber friends, and they'll really respect you. You'll rise up as the leader of your retarded friend group. Adamonicus says, when companies compete, the people win. Always, Adamonicus, always. And hey, I'm a capitalist, but I recognize the big issues of late stage crony capitalism too. So, don't get that mistaken. But yes, the baseline concept, Adamonicus, is literally, yes, companies compete, the people win. When companies and corporations collaborate, the companies alone win. Yep, so true. You really don't understand NATO or tariffs. Well, I'm so enlightened now because you said that. Wow, thank you for explaining it to me, Ingalls Jingles. I can tell with a username like that, you've got it all figured out there, buddy. Why don't you come back during Christmas time when your username's a little more appropriate and we can talk about Santa Claus and cookies. That's all I've got to say about that, though, guys. This stream has lingered on for long enough, but I appreciate all you guys for being here. Be sure to subscribe for more content like this. I do go live, like I said, every single night, Sunday through Friday, and like tonight I did Sundays as well. So subscribe, turn on post notifications so you're notified every time I go live, and you can tune in. Also, like the stream, like I've also asked before. That's free to do, and it really does help the YouTube algorithm push this content out to more people who are desperately in need of information like this. If you really enjoyed this, consider becoming a member today. For members, the members get access to exclusive content and early access to all of my other videos. And other than that, be sure to, if you're really enjoying this, be sure to check out this video right here. I'm going to share that with you. This is a video on H-1B visas and why they're a scam that literally just force indentured servitude upon Indian people as the corporations own them, and then allows the corporations to not only force indentured servitude on Indians, but it allows them to replace us Americans. So go check out that video. Give it the full watch time if you want to support the channel. Comment down below on that video with a comment relating to the topic of the video. Like the video as always. And again, subscribe. Other than that, though, guys, glory to America. God bless the USA. The best country on earth by far. Even right now with all of its problems, I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. We are the best nation, and it's not even close. So glory to America. God bless USA. And may God bless all of you as well. Have a great rest of your evening. Also, by the way, let's do this. Boom. Reported? Well, fuck you. You're banned forever, Samaran 12. May God curse you in your miserable life into a non-existent, purposeless vegetable state while you're forced to look around and watch life move on without you, you scum fuck. Fuck you. But God bless the rest of you. Have a great rest of your evening. And follow me on Twitter. There's a link down below for you there. Follow me on Twitter as well. Bye-bye.